sustainable livelihood, mitigating rural-urban diversities. This multidisciplinary conference is being organized by the IQAC of St. Francis de Sales College, Nagpur, in collaboration with the Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board, Nagpur, and the Postgraduate Teaching Department of Economics, RTM, Nagpur University. This conference is an academic milestone for SFS College, bringing together diverse voices to discuss challenges and solutions in agriculture, forest rights, and sustainable livelihoods while addressing the deepening rural-urban diversities. Over the course of the day, we shall engage in keynote sessions, plenaries, and thought-provoking discussions as this conference paves way for eminent thinkers, policymakers, researchers, and students to reflect upon some of the most pressing concerns of our times: agriculture, equity, and sustainability. Subject that shapes not just livelihood, but the very future of our nation. Can we have a huge round of applause for our fellow participants, our distinguished guests, and the organizers? Thank you. On the occasion, I request everyone to kindly rise for the SFS College anthem.
Come be a strong and beautiful man. For God and country, freely pledge we all, led by the flag for which we stand. Blue for the man that seeks the good and true, red for our progress in the game, white for the glory of a heart that's pure, bright with an ever shining flame. Alma Mater, we hail your glorious and great success. With truth and love will conquer all, for God our land and SFS. Alma Mater, we hail your glorious and great success. With truth and love will conquer all, for God our land and SFS.
Thank you so much, everyone. Light is a symbol of knowledge and lighting of the ceremonial lamp. Please, yes? Please come to the dais. And set the vision for today's thought-provoking gathering, I now invite our respected principal, Dr. Sanjay Sarve, to deliver the welcome address. Sir, please.
Good morning to one and all. It is my privilege to welcome you to this event. I begin with a quote by Maria Montessori: "The land where our roots are, the children must be taught to be and live in harmony with the earth," reminding us that our bond with nature is fundamental to life. Agriculture and forests are the lifelines of humanity. They feed us, clothe us, sustain our planet's ecology. Yet today, as urbanization accelerates, we see growing disparities between rural and urban worlds. Rural communities face migration, resource depletion, and low income. Cities struggle with environmental stress and rising consumption demands. Take the example of Plenary village in Rajasthan, where for every girl child born, they plant 111 trees to address these problems. Because of that, today, those trees provide income, prevent soil erosion, and make the village greener. A powerful lesson for both rural and urban communities. This conference is expected to discuss solutions to some of these questions, like how can we make agriculture climate smart? How do we conserve our forests while supporting livelihoods? And most importantly, how do we harmonize rural and urban aspirations for a sustainable future? This conference will explore these ideas. We'll try to answer these and also try to explore new ideas. For this, we have dignitaries, and this event is presided by our beloved chairman, Most Reverend Dr. Elias Gonsalves. I welcome you, Bishop. Today amongst us is a renowned economist, educationist, writer, a former chairman of UGC, Professor Sukhadeo Thorat. We are fortunate to have him in this conference. I welcome you, sir. Professor Vinayak Deshpande is a well-known figure in Nagpur University. Presently, he is the Vice Chancellor of Raisoni University, Amravati. As well, he was the former Vice Chancellor of our own university. I welcome you, sir. Our resource person, one of our resource person, Professor Ramakumar from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, could not make it to this conference because of heavy rain in Mumbai. We have got other resource person, Professor Elumalai Kannan from Center for Study of Regional Development, CSRD, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. I welcome you, sir. This conference is being hosted in collaboration with the Department of Humanities of our university, and we were expecting that Professor S. Indurkar will join us soon with his efforts. This conference is being hosted. He will be joining us soon. Also, Professor Koreti, Dean Faculty of Science, will join us as a resource person. Reverend Father Anthony D'Souza is a motivator, a guide in all the events or in all the activities that takes place here at SFS. I welcome you, Father. I welcome our trustees, well-wishers, delegates, and you all students for this to this grand and houseful, I can say houseful gathering. Also, we expect more participants to join in some time from now. Let us use this platform to share ideas, shape actions that reduce the rural-urban divide and secure our planet's future. Thank you once again. A heartfelt welcome to one and all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Principal Sir, for your welcome address. Dear all, this morning we are truly blessed with the presence of eminent academicians and thought leaders. It is a proud tradition to honor our guests as a mark of gratitude and respect. To begin the felicitation, it is only fitting that we first extend our warm welcome to our beloved chairman, His Grace, Most Reverend Dr. Elias Gonsalves, the Archbishop of Nagpur and Chairman, SFS College. A visionary shepherd, an inspiring leader, and a constant source of encouragement, His Grace continues to guide our institutions with wisdom and hope. May I now request our principal, Dr. Sanjay Sarve, to kindly felicitate and welcome His Grace Archbishop Elias Gonsalves. Dear all, let us welcome His Grace with a huge round of applause. Thank you, Your Grace. Thank you, sir. We are happy to have with us our college secretary, Very Reverend Father Anthony D'Souza, a dynamic leader, a guiding hand in every initiative, and a constant support to our college. His commitment and vision strengthens the very foundation of our institution. May I now request our Vice Principal, the Reverend Father Praveen D'Souza OP, to kindly felicitate and welcome Very Reverend Father Anthony D'Souza. Welcome, Father. It is an absolute privilege for a budding educator like me to introduce our chief guest and keynote speaker, Padma Shri Professor Sukhadeo Thorat, one of India's most respected educationists, economists, and social thinkers. Professor Thorat completed his BA in Economics from Milind College, Aurangabad, his MA from Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, Marathwada University, and went on to earn his MPhil and PhD in Economics from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He also holds a diploma in Economic Planning from the Warsaw School of Economics, Poland. His distinguished career spans over 4 decades. He began as a faculty member at the Center for the Study of Regional Development, JNU, and later served as visiting faculty at the University of Iowa and the University of Maryland, USA. He was the director of the Indian Institute of Dalit Studies from 2003 to 2006 and went on to hold some of the most significant leadership positions in Indian academia. To enlist a few, Sir was chairman of the University Grants Commission from 2006 to 2011 and later chairman of the Indian Council of Social Science Research, that is ICSSR, New Delhi. He is currently Professor Emeritus at JNU and continues to lead as chair for the Indian Institute of Dalit Studies, the Institute for Social and Economic Change, and the chair for Human Rights and Social Justice at Mahatma Gandhi University, Kerala. Professor Thorat's academic expertise covers rural poverty, caste and social exclusion, economics of marginalized communities, human rights, social justice, and higher education policy reforms. He has authored and edited countless books and research papers, pioneering scholarship on caste-based discrimination and inclusive policies. As chairman of the UGC, he was instrumental in establishing 32 centers for the study of social exclusion and inclusive policy across Indian universities, leaving a lasting imprint on the higher education map of this country. For his outstanding contribution to education and social justice, he has been honored with several awards, including the Padma Shri Award in 2008, the Bharat Shiromani Award in 2009, and Dr. Ambedkar National Award in 2011, among many others. A visionary academic, a policy maker, Professor Thorat has consistently championed the cause of inclusive growth, social justice, and equitable reforms in higher education. I now request our chairman, His Grace Archbishop Elias, to kindly felicitate and extend a warm welcome to Padma Shri Professor Sukhadeo Thorat, sir. It is indeed an honor and privilege to receive sir at SFS College for this very auspicious gathering. Thank you so much, Your Grace. It is my honor to introduce Professor Vinayak Deshpande, a distinguished academician and administrator whose career spans over 4 decades of service to higher education. Dr. Deshpande currently serves as the Vice Chancellor of G.H. Raisoni University, Amravati. Prior to this, he held several key positions at RTM Nagpur University, including the Vice Chancellor, Pro-Vice Chancellor, Registrar, Head of the Department of Business Management, Dean of the Faculty of Commerce and Management, and Professor of Economics and Commerce. He has also served as Assistant Director of the Academic Staff College. Academically, Dr. Deshpande holds a PhD in Economics, along with postgraduate degrees in Commerce, Economics, and Management, and has enriched his expertise through advanced training at prestigious institutions such as the London School of Economics, the Indian Statistical Institute at Kolkata, the Delhi School of Economics, and the Institute of Economic Growth, New Delhi. A prolific researcher and mentor, he has guided over 30 doctoral students, published several research papers, authored books, and serves as the editor of the popular journal Artha Samvad. His scholarship has also contributed to policy consultations, including the 15th Finance Commission of India under Shri N.K. Singh and the Kelkar Committee on Regional Imbalances in the state of Maharashtra as well. Dr. Deshpande has delivered invited lectures at premier forums such as the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Simla, and has represented Indian academia internationally in the Netherlands, Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand. He has also successfully executed major projects for NABARD, UGC, and ICSSR. For his outstanding contribution, he has been awarded with several recognitions, including the Dr. P.R. Parnekar Economic Award in 2018 and the Samajik Abhisaran Award in 2016. An inspiring teacher, mentor, researcher, and institution builder, Dr. Vinayak Deshpande continues to shape academia and the thought of academics and public policy with his vision and leadership. I once again humbly request our chairman, His Grace Archbishop Elias, to kindly felicitate and extend a warm welcome to Professor Vinayak Deshpande. Let us all receive Professor Vinayak Deshpande with a huge round of applause, ladies and gents. Thank you so much, dear dignitaries. I'm happy to introduce Professor Elumalai Kannan, an eminent economist and academician from the Center for the Study of Regional Development, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Professor Kannan obtained his PhD in economics and has devoted his scholarship to agricultural economics, institutional economics, the non-farm sector, and applied econometrics. He has held several prestigious fellowships, including the Doctoral Research Fellowship of the ICSSR, the Junior Research Fellowship of the ICAR, and was a visiting scholar at the University of Saskatchewan, Canada, under the Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute's research grants. Professor Kannan has contributed as a consultant to FAO and collaborated extensively with renowned institutions such as NCAER, ICRISAT, and IFPRI. Professor Kannan's scholarly work has significantly advanced our understanding of Indian agriculture, covering themes such as crop diversification, agricultural exports, rural infrastructure, agricultural incomes, trade diagnostics, and land use transformations in peri-urban areas. His research has been widely published in reputed journals, including Journal of Social and Economic Development, Journal of Agrarian Change, Agricultural Economic Research Review, Journal of the Asia Pacific Economy, and World Development Perspectives. In addition to the journal articles, he has co-edited several important volumes such as Agro and Food Processing Industry in India, published by Springer, The Future Rice Strategy for India, The Economic Growth, Trade and Poverty, a comparative analysis of India and China in 2015. With a career deeply committed to both academic rigor and policy relevance, Professor Kannan is widely regarded as one of the leading voices in agricultural economics in India. I request our Secretary, Very Reverend Father Anthony D'Souza, to kindly felicitate and extend a warm welcome to Professor Elumalai Kannan. Let's all receive Professor Kannan with a huge round of applause, ladies and gents. Thank you, Father. Thank you so much, sir. We are delighted to have with us our close collaborator from Rashtrasanta Tukadoji Maharaj Nagpur University. I especially welcome Professor Satyapriya Indurwade, Head of the Department of Economics, PGTE RTL Nagpur University, and also the joint host for this conference. I now request Father Anthony D'Souza to kindly felicitate and welcome Professor Indurwade. Please, sir. Thank you so much. I may now take this opportunity to invite our chairman, His Grace Archbishop Elias Gonsalves, to address the gathering and formally declare the conference open.
Respected Professor Thorat, respected Professor Deshpande, and all the dignitaries on the dais, distinguished resource persons, esteemed faculty members, my dear students, and the participants from different strata of life. It gives me immense joy and a deep sense of responsibility to welcome you all to National Conference on Agriculture, Forest Rights, and Sustainable Livelihood. This topic has been dear to me ever since once I was traveling from Bombay to Amravati in the train. I met a forest right activist, in a sense, a scientist, and we began to converse, and he, with deep pain in his heart, said, "What have we done to our forests?" He said the whole biodiversity in whole Satpura ranges is completely finished. what is there is only the plantation, the woods of the tea kudu. And then we began to discuss on this serious issue. The issue which concerns all of us today, whether we are in rural or urban setting, whether we are rich or poor, whether we are small or big, irrespective of our caste and creeds, the air we breathe, the water we drink is all the same for us. We are confronted with the reality today. As we gather under the roof of knowledge and dialogue here in this college, we are reminded that the future of our nation depends not only on technological progress and economic growth, but equally on how we treat our soil, our forests, and communities whose lives are intertwined with them, the backbone of our country, India. It sustains nearly half of our population, and yet farmers remain some of the most vulnerable members of our society. We all know Vidarbha is the victim of the suicide cases increasingly year by year, and we have no answers for these questions that the poor farmers raise. Forests, on the other hand, are not merely stretches of green. They are living ecosystems, protectors of biodiversity, and the source of livelihood for millions, especially tribal and marginalized communities. The Forest Right Act is not just a law, but a recognition of the dignity, culture, and contribution to those communities that have lived in harmony with the nature for centuries. When I was traveling sometimes in Melghat, the whole Melghat, what that scientist told me was the reality. Talking to the poor Kurku tribe there, who depended on the forest, to live on the forest fruits. Now they have lost not only their livelihood, but their problem of hunger has increased. The nature was providing them the seasonal fruits are all gone. The those animals depended on the forest fruits are also left high and dry. So they leave the forest and come to the plains, to our homes and to our houses, surely in search of food. Sustainability, climate change, deforestation, soil degradation, and water scarcity are not distant threats. They are realities affecting our farmers, our food security, and our future sustainable livelihood are therefore not a choice, but a necessity. They mean ensuring economic stability without compromising the rights of nature and the dignity of people. This is not the phenomenon in our country, but worldwide. While I was studying in Canada, we visited some First Nation communities, and they did express this concern. These First Nation people in Canada are on the government payroll. Government gives them their required amount of pension every month. But what the community has become is busy with that money which government gives them, gambling, all sorts of addictions, and the span of life is reduced to 45 age. The same as my Kotku tribe in Satpura ranges, or Kakri tribe in Thana district, or Raigad district. The fate of this tribe is become the same all over the world. Today, this conference is a significant because it brings together three vital strands. First, agriculture, the lifeline of our nation. Forest rights, the call for justice and equality. Sustainable livelihood, the vision for the future. Dear friends, for our young college students, all of you gathered here, at times we don't feel the pinch of it because you are in the urban settings. But finally, go to your roots from where you come. You come from village and different communities. This is not just an academic exercise. It is an invitation to reflect, to innovate, and to engage with the most pressing issues of our time. You are the generation that will have to balance development with ecology, rights with responsibilities, and growth with sustainability. Pope Francis, in his encyclical Laudato Si, praise to you, who are Creator. He created everything that which will be sustainable, that which will be handed over to generations. But what we are doing to it, we are exploiting it so much that the next generation, we will not have anything to offer for. The next generation will blame us. What did you do for us? You left this world as a garbage for us? My dear friends, I urge you to use this platform to learn from experts gathered here. Share your ideas and open your minds to new perspectives. Open your hearts and the eyes and ears of your own soul to see the new avenues that which we need to open up. Let this conference not end with papers and discussions, just as a captive crowd here, but alone, with a renewed commitment to act, to do something, to do a small little thing, a little thing that which will bring change, and change for good for you and for the generation to come. To support farmers, to uphold the rights of indigenous communities, and to build a future where development is inclusive, just and sustainable. On this occasion, I extend my heartfelt congratulations to our principal, our manager, the IQAC committee, for organizing this relevant seminar, this conference. Such a meaningful dialogue, a dialogue that which will bring awareness, consciousness to protect, promote, and preserve our universe. And I warmly welcome all participants who will enrich this deliberation with their insights. With these words, I declare this National Conference on Agriculture, Forest, Rights and Sustainable Livelihood open. May this also mitigating rural and urban diversities, divides can bring us together and on one platform. May our discussion sow the seeds of wisdom, justice, and sustainability for generations to come. With these words, once again, I declare this National Conference on Agriculture and Forest Rights open. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Your Grace, for your words of wisdom and for declaring this very important conference open. Ladies and gents, kindly let us hear it for our chairman once again. Thank you. Dear all, the highlight of this morning's session is going to be the keynote address. We are honored to welcome one of India's most distinguished economists and educationists, Padma Shri Professor Sukhadeo Thorat, the former chairman of the University Grants Commission. May I now invite Professor Thorat to deliver the keynote address. Please, sir. I also request all the dignitaries to kindly take their seats downstairs.
Morning to all of you. I'm the President of the inaugural function, distinguished guests, faculty, students, ladies and gentlemen. I begin with the appreciation of the college and the principal who has organized this conference on agriculture, forest rights and sustainable livelihood, mitigating rural and urban diversities. And I also thank for inviting me to give a keynote address. I was told by the secretary that possibly I had visited once and given a lecture, but when I was chairman of the UGC, but I had forgotten that. So I was very keen to visit this, one of the oldest college in the city, and which has played a very important role in the promotion of higher education in the state. Christian missionaries, as it is, have played a very important role in the promotion of school and higher education, particularly among the marginalized community. I was one of the beneficiaries of the facilities created by the churches. I had my 5th, 8th, 9th and 10th class education in the Catholic and Protestant school. So I recall that stay of my education with great pride. They provided education with very reasonable resources, and therefore the poor student could access the education. With this gratitude and appreciation, I will begin my keynote address. The issue of agriculture and forest right, or particularly of sustainable development, is important. The development of agriculture in a sustainable manner, as well as the progress development of the forest in a sustainable manner, in the sense that the resources should be, agricultural resources and forest resources should be used in a manner such that not only the present generation benefit out of it, but also the productivity and capability of the soil and the forest is maintained for the future generation. So we sustain and maintain the capabilities of land and forest for the future generation. The growth with sustainability is a very recent concept in growth economics. But in the beginning, the strategy and approach to the growth was governed by different other considerations. Therefore, in order to understand the recognition of sustainable development and its emergence among the economies and development economies, it is useful that we go back to the history a little bit and understand how we began to recognize that sustainable development is necessary. So I will give you the historical journey from the beginning till the sustainable development so that you can have an idea, background. The student and the teachers can have a background and accordingly they can benefit. The history of, when we talk of history of growth, we essentially mean when we mean growth, there are two words, growth and development. When we talk of growth, we essentially talk of growth in the income. The income of the person, the per capita income of the person. Because if you have income in your hand, either through employment or farming or industry, you can meet your need, necessary need of food, clothes, housing, and other well-being. So income is very important. Availability of income through different channels, sources is very necessary. Therefore, for the development of the individuals, the economy is focused on how to increase the income of the nation and, of course, of the people in the nation. That's how the father of the nation, Adam Smith, wealth of nation. The preoccupation of economics was how to increase the income as much as possible so that the income can be used to meet the basic necessities of the individual and the family. Now, if we go to the strategy of economic development, it began the issue of economic growth began much earlier with Adam Smith and all that, and Marshall. But the strategy of an approach to economic development began somewhere in the mid-50s. The economists who developed this concept of growth alone approach, not of sustainable development or equitable growth, no. The growth alone approach, it is called a growth alone approach, that just increase the income and everything will be okay, everything will fall in appropriate place. If the income of the nation increases, which means the income of the individual increases, which means they have income in their hand and they can meet their requirement. So focus on growth. So one of the World Bank economists, Martin Ghughey, he is no more. He described this as a growth alone approach. Now this was given by Simon Kuznets in 1956, 54, mid-50s. Simon Kuznets was an economist located in the Chicago School of Economics. And he was the first economist who studied the temporal movement of income over a period of about 100 years or little less than 100 years in USA. And he discovered, he generated the income data for the first time. He was able to generate the income data through the tax, because people pay tax. And their tax rate is depend on their income. So you get the income data. So he generated the income data, time series data for the first time in the world. In India it was done by Vijay, but in the USA it began with Simon Kuznets. And he examined the movement of the income, growth in the income over a period of time, and came with a theory of development. And that theory is that he just proposed for the developing country that please, you have a growth model in a manner such that income increase at as fast as possible rate. Increase the income at a fast rate. Now all those determinants on which income growth depend, then the government should focus. At that time, the theory was of economic development to increase the growth was invest in capital asset. Invest in agriculture productivity, agriculture input, seed, fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, pesticides, machinery, irrigation. Increase those inputs in agriculture so agriculture income will increase. Invest in industry, start as many industries as possible so that your people get employment and income increase. There was not much discussion at that time of service sector, but service sector was a small sector. So this was one that increased the income in agriculture and industry. They were not aware about that when they proposed increasing the agriculture income, put more input, put more fertilizer, pesticide and irrigation water. They were not aware that extensive use of irrigation water and fertilizers may soil the fertility of the land. It will make saline. That was not at the back of the mind. When land becomes saline, it will lose its productivity for the future generation. But that was not in there at the back of their mind. That issue came later on, much later, sustainable development. But the approach was invest as much as in agriculture, in new input, as much as in industry, increase the income and then increase the. There was other point that you should remember of this development approach, and that was that this will happen within the private economy. By that time, the Soviet communist economy had come, but there also this model of business was within the framework of private economy, and the model was typically Adam Smith model and others that allow the private sector to grow income. Private sector will invest, farmer will invest in agriculture with the motive of profit. It is the profit motive which drives the farmers to increase the productivity and income. Or it is the motive of profit which motivates the industrialists to set up industry, increase the profit. So within the private sector, there is what is called invisible hand, as we say, that will increase the income. And it says that don't interfere with private economy. The state should not interfere with private economy, because if state intervene, it will increase, it will reduce efficiency and it will increase inefficiency, and growth rate will be less, income growth will be less. So a typical model of economic growth in the private sector is to allow the private sector to invest and increase in their income through the market mechanism without interference by the state. So this was what Simon Kuznets at that time became a great development model, but it was a growth alone model. Increase the income as fast as possible. But Simon Kuznets was also aware about the equity aspect. Although he did not discuss about equity aspect or sustainability aspect, at least he was aware about the equity aspect. Please understand that. He said that when the income increases in the beginning, maybe for 30 or 40 years, there will be inequality in the income distribution. Which means those who have means of production, those who have land, those who have industry, they will benefit more than the wage worker. So wage laborers' income will increase, but increase at a lower rate, and the income of the farmer and those who invest in capital and industry will increase at a faster rate. As a result, there will be a tendency to concentrate the income and the wealth in the hand of few, and income inequality will increase. This was one proposition that Simon Kuznets gave. But he also made a second proposition with respect to the equal distribution of income, and he said that, don't worry, if the income inequality increases in the early phase of the economic development, in the private economy, don't worry, because he discovered that after 40, 50 years, the inequality began to decline. which means that after 30-40 years, certain period, the income began to reach the poor also. And maybe because of increased employment, maybe because of increase in the wages, the income of the poor classes, low income classes also increased. And inequality will reduced and poor will benefit. In other words, if you follow the income growth alone approach, wherein the income increase at a faster rate, after a certain period of time, your poor's income will also grow. As a result, poverty will reduce and everybody will benefit. That was the Simon Kuznets' major proposition. He gave a very interesting word that when the income increases at a faster rate, and that after some time it reaches poor, instead of using the word reaches, he uses trickle down. The income will also trickle down to the poor. So it is called a trickle down hypothesis or approach of economic growth. So this was the model of the Simon Kuznets. Have an economic development of agriculture and industry and forests in a manner so that income growth rate increase at a faster rate, 4, 5, 10%, whatever. And that invest more in agriculture and industry, and then after some time income will also percolate, trickle down to the poor, so poverty will reduce and country will develop, everybody will be developed. But the state should not intervene, allow the private sector to go the way it is growing, because this is what will happen. This is what has happened in USA on the basis of 40, 50, 70 years study of business. And then it became a fundamental recommendation. The World Bank accepted Simon Kuznets' model of growth alone approach. It not only increased income but also increased income of the poor, and it brings the well-being of the country as a whole. So the World Bank and IMF recommended this development model to the developing countries. You will recall structural function approach and globalization at that time, about 30-40 years before. And while this was happening in World Bank recommended, in 70s, some of the people became suspicious about it. And in the World Bank itself, I am not spending more time on that, World Bank itself, economists called Popnik and others, and he was also joined by Montesi, who was the director of the IMF at that time. They began to suspect that, look, we have an experience of some of the countries in Latin America where income has grown faster, but poverty has not reduced as fast. Poverty remained along in the company of the growth. So there is some problem there. Income can increase at a faster rate, but it may not trickle down to the poor and poverty remain. Then what's the use of growth? Growth has to help everybody. So they brought out a book, Redistributive Growth, and there are a couple of other articles by others, and they argue that no, increase in the income of the poor or low income person doesn't depend on growth of income alone. Income may grow at a faster rate, for example 10% rate. So if your income is 100 rupees and your income will increase at 10%, which means there is a net increase of 10 rupees annually. But then out of the 10 rupees, 9 rupees will go to rich and only 1 will reach to poor. So it's not necessary that whenever there is a high growth rate, it will reach to the poor. Sorry, I had an operation yesterday. I could carry without stay for some time, but the light is affecting my eye. So they say that there are other factors on which the distribution of income to the poor is dependent, and then they give a number of factors. I don't want to go into this. So they pointed out that how the traditional sector grow. Does the agriculture's income also grow? And the wage laborer engaged in agriculture increases, their income increases. So whether the income reaches to the poor or not depends on agriculture development. And whether agriculture development labor absorbing or not, or labor displacing, Because if you have agriculture with mechanization, there is no increase in the employment. Again, only the farmer benefit, not the wage laborer. So the agriculture growth has to be such that it increases employment of the wage laborer so that their income increases and poverty gets reduced. So the type of growth matters, not the growth alone. Similarly in industry, that the traditional industries, household industry, they should be modernized. That is what they found. That some of the countries which have modernized their industry, there the poverty was low, more employment, poor benefits. Also they found out that education plays a very important role. You may have a growth, but growth, industrial growth and even agriculture growth at that time require educated people who have knowledge of the industrial production. So skill education, professional education is very important. They also identify that in countries where growth has helped poor, where the country where state has intervened in the economy. And state intervening in what form? Providing incentive to the private sector, also creating public infrastructure, road, electricity, irrigation, on which the growth depends. So the role of the state is important, interference of the state is important. Why Simon Business and Adam Smith says that no, leave the private sector alone. State should keep a respectable distance. These people, Klopnik and other, and Montes Galwani and other, they came with no. State intervention is necessary for promoting growth. Because private sector would not invest in some of the public good. Private sector would not invest in road. Because they do not benefit. Everybody benefits if you create a road. So where there is a question of public good, government has to come. Drinking water, road, electricity, irrigation. There are several public good which the private sector would not intervene, therefore government has to come. So, just to summarize, and they also discovered another thing, that by that time Asia had begun to show a very rapid increase in income and poverty had declined. It is called a miracle of the third world, second world. So the income in Japan, income in Thailand, Hong Kong, several Asian countries, not the South Asian, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, China. So the Asian countries have shown very rapid increase in the growth and decline in the poverty, but they did not follow, they had not adopted the model suggested by Simon Business. They followed something else, a pragmatic approach, where state intervention, investment in the industry and agriculture, technology, all was found there. Therefore, by 2000, a new approach of development came. And that approach was inclusive development, inclusive growth. You have heard this word. And what does inclusive growth mean? The inclusive growth means that when the income increases, everybody should be the part of increasing. If the income increases by 10 rupees at the rate of 10%, then some should go to the poor, some should go to the lower middle class, some should go to the middle class, some should go to the higher income group also, some should go to the highest. But everybody should participate in the increased income and benefit out of it. That is why it is called inclusive growth. Now World Bank has now developed other word also, sharing prosperity. Very famous word by World Bank. That there is a prosperity, but everybody should be a part of it. You should be able to share that prosperity. Then no one leave behind. Another phrase by World Bank. That when there is a growth, nobody should be left behind as poor. Everybody should be benefited. So the inclusive growth concept came, and this was the concept. Within the inclusive growth concept, now remember that inclusive growth alone approach, there is no talk of sustainability. There is no talk that because of the growth in income, growth of agriculture by putting input, modern technology and all that, USA had a modern technology. Include seed, chemical fertilizer, pesticides and machinery, of course, mechanization was a huge scale. Still the idea of sustainability did not come. Inclusivity. Now there was one particular group within the inclusive growth who proposed inclusive growth. They make an additional point, and you should remember that. And that point is that income may increase, it may also be inclusive in the sense that many groups are benefiting from the increased income, their income is also increasing, but the income of the lowest and the poorest may not increase as much. Or even if the income of the low income group increase, the income of the poorest doesn't increase, and as a result poverty doesn't decline. Because they found that the income has increased at a rapid rate, but who benefited? Lower middle class, middle class. At the most, the top section of the lower income group. But the bottom, real bottom, the chronically poor, hungry, living in slum, they did not benefit. Therefore, one sub aspect of inclusive growth was developed, and that was pro-poor growth, poverty-reducing growth. That the income should increase in a manner such that lower middle class benefit, middle class benefit, upper middle class benefit, high income benefit. But at the same time, the income of the lowest poor, ultra poor, Michael Lincoln used that word, ultra poor, their income should increase so that the poverty get reduced. They get income, they can eat, they can have good housing, they can have clothes, they can send their children to the school. So the poverty reducing growth, or to put it in this way, a inclusive growth which is poverty reducing, or which is the growth which increases the income of the most poor came. So you can see the journey from growth alone approach to pro-poor approach. It is during this time people began to think, they discovered that the capability of soil had been reducing because of excessive use of fertilizers, modern seed, pesticides. It was discovered in USA. I was teaching at Iowa University, EMS, in Iowa State for 2 years. And Iowa State is the #1 in the world of producer of corn. It's called a storehouse of corn. The corn that we used to get in 60s when we were hungry and we had nothing, the corn used to come from Iowa. And there they had discovered that because of excessive use of this technology, the capability and productive capacity of agriculture has declined. Soil had begun to become saline. Then the 70s in Asia, and also later on in 70s in India, we began to realize that excessive use of irrigation, particularly in paddy cultivation, where water remains for a long period of time, or in Punjab, they give very high dose of irrigation and fertilizer, the land has become saline. Because nobody told it that the more use of irrigation may result into the loss of fertility of the land. Only present generation will benefit, for future generation no production. So the concept of then sustainability began to emerge. And Jeffrey Sachs and other people then began to talk. So what is the journey then? Growth alone approach to growth, which is inclusive growth, which is a pro-poor growth, and then they began to talk very recently sustainable growth. So growth which increase income, growth which increase income of all, the growth which increase income of poor, and the growth which is sustainable. That it will keep the resources ready for next generation also. That is the journey of the growth, from growth alone approach to sustainable development approach. So if you look at the objective of the 11th plan of ours, and 12th plan of ours, it is for the first time we agree that the 11th plan's objective will be inclusive growth, pro-poor growth, and also sustainable growth. Now sustainable growth then requires different strategies. Therefore the approach came. Don't use fertilizer, use manure, follow the traditional technology, use local seed. So the approach toward the using of traditional input and increasing productivity began to appear. But the traditional input has lost their productivity. They had achieved and there was nothing beyond that. Therefore the new technology came. But the new technology then had to be, the new seed and fertilizer had to be produced in a manner such that it doesn't spoil the productivity of the land. So the technological innovation began to develop. Then they talked growth with sustainability. There is one point which came little later, although along sustainable development, but also came along with the pro-poor growth. That point is that it was accepted by Indian government as well as everybody that growth should be socially inclusive and pro-poor. But at the same time, there are economists from Asian Development Bank in Bangkok, Manila, began on the basis of the Asian country began to point out the limitation of pro-poor. Their argument was that poor is a general category, income-based category. All those income is say whatever income we define as a poor, below poverty line. So poor is a general indicator, aggregate indicator of level of income. Carlson and others who are German economists who argue formula that to participate in a growth, the participation of the poor in the growth comes only through employment, wage employment or regular salary, because they are not farmers, they don't have land, they don't have industry. The most poverty-stricken person is group is wage laborer, and among the wage laborer, the casual laborer, not the permanent employee like you. You don't have land, you don't have industry, you may have at your home, but your main source of income is your wage employment in the college. But you are a permanent employee, you get annual income, you get job security, social security, pension, medical insurance. But casual labor doesn't get anything. So when we talk about pro-poor growth, it essentially means that you get an employment. They are the most poor. Then they began to make a point that look, poor is not a homogeneous category. Poor is a heterogeneous category in terms of identity. They are poor who are scheduled caste, they are poor who are scheduled tribe, they are poor who are woman-headed household, they are poor who are low-income Muslim, they are poor who are low-income Christian, or scheduled caste converted to Christianity, tribal converted to Christianity. They argued that the major thing is that employment being essential, and to get income from the growth, there should be equal opportunity for employment on the basis of merit. That I have a merit and I apply and I get it. So equal opportunity is very important. Now they went a step ahead and they argued that the social identity of a person bypass the equal opportunity and discrimination comes in. In employment, your merit is not appreciated as much as your caste background, as your religious background, as your gender background, as your ethnic background like tribe. So there is a contradiction between merit and the social background. The discrimination in employment comes in. So then you require a different policy, because those who are discriminated on the basis of their identity, they may suffer because they may not be able to participate equally as much as the high caste or Hindu majority person, non-Muslim, non-Christian, male vis-a-vis female. They will have more opportunity and they will have more income, and others will remain backward. Therefore, there was a growth in the economics of theories of economics of discrimination. Because all classical economies, Adam Smith and Kuznets and others, were based on the assumption that the economy is doesn't discriminate. It is neutral to the social background of the person. It only respects merit. But again in Chicago, Department of Economics, there was a gentleman called, what is his name, who wrote the first theory of discrimination. Becker. Becker wrote a first book wherein he said that no, market is not neutral, market is not indifferent, market is discriminatory. It gives the job on the basis of gender, it prefers male vis-a-vis female, it prefers the black vis-a-vis white. In India, it prefers high caste vis-a-vis low caste. In India, it prefers the Hindu vis-a-vis the Christian and the Muslim. And also within the Christian, the converted Christian from the scheduled caste benefit less than the high caste Christian, or the scheduled caste Sikh benefit less than the high caste Sikh, or the converted Muslim or so-called scheduled caste benefit less than the Khan and the Ali who are high caste Muslim. So all this social identity was brought into play, and he developed a theory of discrimination. He was a Jew, that is why he was sensitive to the issue of discrimination. Then it was again further developed by Arrow, who was also a Jew. It was further developed by Becker, not Becker, Akerlof, he was also a Jew. There is also discrimination within the academic. Which issue you will take depend on your identity. Now then it was extended further by William Garrity, who was a black, very renowned economist, who is at the Duke University. The summary of this discrimination is the following. That summary is that in order that the poor benefit, there should be equal participation in the market for employment on the basis of merit. And that since the market do not respect merit often and discriminate it and give priority to others, so there has to be a separate policy. Not only growth policy, but how do you participate and ensure participation of which is discriminated to, therefore the policy of affirmative action and reservation came in. This, since the male and female and blacks and the scheduled castes and the Christians and the Muslims, vis-a-vis religious, will face unequal opportunity, there has to be some preference to them in employment. And then how do you measure the preference? Measure the preference in terms of the population, therefore the concept of quota came. Everywhere, 113 countries have affirmative action policy. Japan has, they have a community called ITA. ITA means field. That is how the name is given to, they are called Ghughey, ITA and Ghughey. So the Asian Development Bank economies, based on their experience of Asian countries, which is characterized by diversity of group, suggested that we also require, and listen to it carefully, we also require non-discriminatory growth, disadvantage reducing growth. Now, so what is the journey of the growth? Growth alone approach. Then came inclusive growth, then came pro-poor growth, then came non-discriminatory growth, and then came sustainable development approach. And when they discovered that the very productivity of soil is being destroyed, or you are removing the forest. Forest needs to be clear, there is no problem. In America, the entire forest was removed. That's how you got the agricultural land. But there is also a condition that a particular proportion of the forest should be under forest in order to maintain the climatic balance. So the proportion is about 25% or so. We have less. At least 25% of the land should be under the forest. So now the whole thinking began to the sustainable development. That how do we have the technology? How do we change the hybrid seed? How do we change the chemical fertilizer or pesticide which will not affect the capability of the soil? So there is now technological innovation coming up separately. How do we use the water? Then the technology came. Israeli technology, dripping water. Give the water at the root of the plant. Don't have the flow water, because flow water cover all the soil and spoil. So dripping water, giving water at the root of the plant. So all kind of new technology of even irrigation came there to avoid the negative impact of the irrigation. Same land and same atmospheric situation and balance, climatic balance. Friend, this is the story that I wanted to share with you, and you have taken a very important topic for discussion. I congratulate you on this topic. Thank you very much.
For that deeply insightful and inspiring keynote address titled From Growth Alone to Inclusive and Sustainable Development Approach, Reflection on Evolution of Growth Theories. Thank you so much once again. Dear all, as they say, gratitude is the memory of the heart. To express our collective thanks and conclude this inaugural session, I now invite Father Praveen D'Souza, the Vice Principal of SFS College, to deliver the formal vote of thanks.
Good morning to one and all. It is my proud privilege and pleasant duty to extend the vote of thanks at the formal inauguration of this National Conference on Agriculture, Forest Rights and Sustainable Livelihood, Mitigating Rural-Urban Diversities, organized in collaboration with the Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board, Nagpur, and the Postgraduate Teaching Department of Economics, RTMNU, Nagpur. This conference holds special significance as it follows our recently concluded two-day national conference on advances in chemical and life sciences towards sustainable biodiversity. While that conference addressed biodiversity from the lens of life sciences, today's gathering expands the dialogue by focusing on agriculture, forest rights, and sustainable livelihoods, issues that directly impact rural-urban realities. Together, these initiatives reflect our institution's commitment to holistic, socially relevant scholarship. At the very outset, I express my heartfelt gratitude to His Grace Most Reverend Archbishop Dr. Elias Gonzalez, Chairman and Patron of SFS College, for his gracious presence and inspiring us with his wise words. His vision and blessings remain a guiding force to us at all times. Let us give a big round of applause for the Archbishop. I also extend my sincere thanks to Reverend Father Anthony D'Souza, Secretary Manager of SFS College Society, for his invaluable support and constant encouragement. I mean it when I say constant encouragement. His guidance has been instrumental in bringing this event to fruition. Let's also hear it for Father. My gratitude goes in a special way to our chief guest, Professor Subhash B. Kondavar, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor of RTMNU Nagpur. Though he could not be present with us today, his goodwill and unwavering support remain a source of encouragement. We are deeply honored by the presence of our keynote speaker, the chief guest, Padma Shri Professor Sukhadeo Thorat, former chairman UGC, whose illuminating inaugural address on the theme, as we heard, from growth alone to inclusive and sustainable development approach, reflection on evolution and growth theories, how well he explained to us as a true teacher, true visionary, man from the field. And we have been enlightened with his thought-provoking session, the keynote address. And his address has enriched this gathering and set the academic tone of the conference. Thank you very much, sir. Let's hear it for him. I extend heartfelt thanks to our guest of honor, Professor Vinayak Deshpande, Vice Chancellor of G.H. Raisoni University, Amravati, who will be sharing his reflections on the topic issues on pricing related to tomato, onion and potato, and adding grace to this occasion. So kindly do not leave your seats. After the high tea, we come back here to listen to his illuminating thoughts. Let us give a big round of applause for him. In the same spirit, I also acknowledge with gratitude Professor S. Vidurwade, Dean, Faculty of Economics, RTMNU, whose encouragement and presence have lent further dignity to this session. Let's clap for him. I wish to record my thanks to our distinguished resource persons, Professor Elumalai Kannan from JMU New Delhi, who will deliver his address on the theme India's Agriculture at a Crossroads, Challenges and Strategies for Development, followed by Professor Vijay Ghughey from ISR Vigyan Mandal and Professor R. Ramakumar from KISS Mumbai, whose expertise will enrich the forthcoming deliberations. Let's give them a big round of applause. A very special mention must be made of our panelists, whose participation will bring multiple perspectives to this theme. That's Professor Shamrao Koretti, Dean, Faculty of Humanities, RTMNU, Dr. Manoj Madavi, Assistant Professor, Annasahar Kundevar College, Nagpur, Reverend Father Balraj Madanu, Director, NRCDC Estates, Dr. Vikas K. Jambulkar, Associate Professor and Head of Department of Political Science, RTMNU, Dr. Hitesh Dadmal, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics, RTMNU, Dr. Samit Mahore, Director of Lifelong Learning and Extension, Rashtrasan Maharaj Nagpur University. So they will be here with us for the panel discussion in the afternoon. We are truly grateful to each of you for your willingness to share your expertise and enrich the discussions. I also extend warm thanks to our collaborators, the MSBB Nagpur, for their valued partnership and commitment to ecological sustainability, which resonates so closely with our theme. Equally, I acknowledge the leadership of our conveners, Dr. Sanjay Sarve, Principal of SFS College, and Professor S. Indurwade, RTMNU, for their vision and efforts in guiding this conference, along with the tireless work of the organizing secretaries, coordinators, and the entire organizing committee, who have worked diligently behind the scenes. I would like to pause here for a while and especially mention Principal dear Sarve sir, because it was his initiative and inspiration that 2 to 3 conferences, national conferences, have become a reality. As I said, in the month of February, we had a national conference on the department, on the theme of chemical and life sciences. This one basically from the Department of Faculty of Humanities, and one more is planned, and that is from the Faculty of Physical and Digital Sciences. So it has been his vision, his encouragement, his backing to all of us. So I think that will be a great gift from his side to us, to our institution. Let's hear it for him. Finally, I extend my heartfelt thanks to all the faculty members, scholars, students and participants from across the country, especially from Nagpur. Your presence and active involvement will make this academic journey truly meaningful. As we move forward into the technical sessions, let us carry with us the spirit of dialogue and collaboration so that our deliberations may contribute to sustainable, equitable solutions for our society. Thank you all once again.
much, Father Praveen. Ladies and gents, we'll be back in 20 minutes time from now. We'll take a break for high tea, and the high tea will be served in the hall right next to this very auditorium. So thank you so much for joining us in this formal inaugural session. See you on the other side.
It gives us immense pleasure to introduce Professor Vinayak Deshpande. Professor Vinayak Deshpande has served with distinction at RTM Nagpur University as Pro-Vice Chancellor, Acting Vice Chancellor, Registrar and a Senior Faculty Member. His academic career and administrative leadership reflect a lifelong dedication to higher education. He has played a key role in strengthening institutional frameworks, academic quality, and governance in the university system. His research on sustainable agriculture directly resonates with today's discussion, focusing on issues of pricing related to tomato, onion, and potatoes. I request Professor Vinayak Deshpande to please come forward and share his insights.
Francis Research College, Nagpur, to organize National Conference on Agriculture, Forest Rights and Sustainable Livelihood. Dignitaries present here. This conference is organized in collaboration with Maharashtra State Biodiversity Board and PGTD of Economics and RTM Nagpur. Principal of this college, Dr. Sanjay Sarve, Dr. Indulkar, Dr. Tinu Joseph, organizing secretary, and all the delegates for this conference. I am thankful to SFS College for inviting me to share some of the views relating to the agriculture sector, and I am so happy that I could meet my colleagues after a very, very long gap, and for that I am thankful to the college for organizing this conference. Friends, we had a wonderful keynote address by Professor Thorat, where he showed us the way that how rural-urban divide in India is becoming a complex issue with deep-rooted economic and social dimensions. And addressing this issue of division is crucial, especially for achieving inclusive and sustainable growth. At the same time, equitable access to resources and opportunities for all citizens. And therefore, it is quite interesting to note that approximately 70% of the population, constituting 68% of households, they reside in rural areas, wherein about 30% of the population, comprising 32% of households. So despite government initiatives like the Jal Jeevan Mission, 22% of rural households have access to piped water throughout the year, while significantly about 59% of the urban population enjoys such kind of access. And that also reflects the kind of division we have between rural and urban areas. And therefore, rural India is obviously forced to rely on groundwater, untreated surface water, and over 80% of urban population have some kind of access to basic amenities, where you don't have that kind of amenities in rural area. So that is how the divide is ultimately linked with the issue of sustainable development also, where more and more dependency you find on the natural resources, and that creates a lot of problems, and that brings the issue of sustainability, forest rights, and therefore I appreciate SFS College for taking initiative in organizing this conference, and I am sure that our research scholars, teachers, and those who are working in this area, they will be benefited from this particular conference. The topic which I have chosen for this particular conference, you may get surprised that how this topic is relevant, important in this particular conference. That is pricing relating to certain basic commodities, agricultural commodities, and I thought that if we reflect on these areas, probably it would be easier to see how policies can be framed relating to these commodities also, and why these commodities are getting important. Basically, as we all are aware, that politics nowadays is based on prices of tomato, prices of onion, prices of other vegetables, potato also. And then we also observe that how farmers are throwing when they are not getting price for tomato. They are just literally throwing tomatoes on street. That is also we have experienced. And today if you enter in the market, you would realize that price of tomato is more than 100 rupees. This is the current situation. And this is how we find extreme fluctuations in these particular three commodities, to which now people have started calling it as top. That is tomato, onion and potato. Somebody call it as pot. Somebody, they call it as OTP. So that is how people have started paying attention to these three vegetables. And let me tell you, Reserve Bank of India, they have published one working paper on these three crops also. Recently what happened, government has assigned a job along with the Cost Institute of Calcutta, and we took this project. So I thought that let us share some of the ideas relating to you, relating to our society, and probably research scholars will get some idea that how we can look at this particular problem and why these three commodities are becoming so relevant and important, especially survival of the political parties. It is based on these three crops. और काफी बार हम ऐसा कहते हैं कि पॉलिटिशियंस को पैच ने रुलाया और पैच की वजह से आंखों में पानी आ रहा है, and that is how you have observed that many times government talking down because of these three commodities prices, and therefore everybody is worried that how these prices are fluctuating every now and then, and is there any mechanism like we have mechanism for other commodities, other kinds of agriculture products, but probably there is no solution which people are finding, which government is finding, in order to set some policies relating to these particular three major crops. And therefore we have chosen this. Actually we are trying to develop pricing model for these three commodities, and this we are working with some of the faculty members from Department of Economics of Mumbai University. I am also associated with it, and that is how we have undertaken this project. So whatever the preliminary findings we have, I would like to share with you. With your kind permission, because podium is also there, so I will come to that side, and then we will have thorough discussion on this particular topic. We will talk about food inflation and inflation in India. We have to analyze that what are the commodities which are relevant and important in order to create that kind of inflationary pressure in the country. So what we have observed, that when the prices of these three commodities move, when they fall down or when they increase, you find its effect on the other vegetable prices also. And that's why further I thought that this would be relevant and important to see how the prices of these commodities are moving, and along with that, how one can see the effect of these commodities prices on other vegetable prices. And that is how we are trying to analyze this particular issue. As we all are aware that the thrust of these sectors, that is agriculture and allied sectors, it includes promotion of inclusive growth, enhancement of rural income, providing employment, ensuring food security. And therefore the share, if we consider agriculture and allied sector in overall gross value addition, since 2017-18 it has been around 14-15%, and periodic labor force, however, over the same period indicates that these sectors employ about 59.2%. And therefore in that situation, we are trying to find out how we can think about inclusive growth, where there is disproportion between the contribution which sector is making and the people employed in that particular sector. So the nuanced implications of employment in these sectors are crucial, because on an average you find 75.2% of rural females and 52% of rural males were employed in agriculture. Why I am bringing this issue? Because for the first time I could see in Gadchiroli and other parts of our region that female have started driving bullock carts. We never saw such kind of situation, and feminization of agriculture is now quite visible. And therefore that is another dimension to the problem. So when we talk about inclusive growth, probably now we have to think about how the institutional framework can be developed for the female participation in agriculture sector. And in fact, we suggested when we did some work in Kirkar committee that how this issue can be tackled and how we can encourage women to participate in this sector more. And therefore we suggested one institute under the name WATI, and that is the Women Agriculture Training Institute, and that is what we proposed for the government of Maharashtra to establish, because you find that participation of women is also increasing beyond our imagination. And this data also indicate more or less similar thing, and therefore we believe that there has to be some institutional framework in order to probably develop further the agriculture sector with the help of participation of women. Now, why we are talking about this talk, and why is it relevant to discuss this stock pricing? Farming, we say that it's a life-giving profession and it should not become a life-taking profession. So morning, our father pointed out about how suicides are increasing in the region of Vidarbha. So if there is a significant change in one of the vegetables, the prices of other vegetables might change in a similar pattern. And therefore, in certain cases, you can actually observe in the market that how vegetable prices are growing. And this rise in prices, mainly because these three commodities prices first they rise, and then you have its effect on the other vegetable commodities. So transmission within the top group does happen, and it tends to generalize. So tomato, onion and potato are among the largest produced and consumed vegetables in India, and their contribution to the variance in food and headline inflation is sizable. So when we talk about the inflationary figures, then that is reflected. But commodity-wise, you don't get, because weightage given in the consumer price index is also not that significant for these three commodities. But in reality, you find changes in these prices affect the overall vegetable prices. And therefore, that part is important. Next. So in this situation, how it is necessary to understand this whole process. So as I said, it is the largest produced consumed vegetable, and combined weight is near 4.8% in CPI food and beverages category, 2.2% in CPI combined. So their contribution to the variance in food and headline inflation is sizable, and hence it is of interest to understand the dynamics of the price behavior and its association with food inflation. So tops are highly perishable, small duration crops with considerable price volatility and variability over seasons. So it is characterized by some regional concentration of production, inadequate cold storage infrastructure and adverse impact of changing weather conditions, and that is how it is resulting in mismatch between whatever supply you get in the market and the way people are demanding this product, and therefore you find the headline inflation which is going upward because of mismatch between the demand and supply. Next point. So that is how this price volatility which is rising is a concern. Total production of vegetable in India is roughly about 18.5 crore tons, and if we look at the production of potato, onion and tomato, which is about 5.5 crore tons, 2.3 crore tons for onion, to almost more than 50% is the contribution of these three vegetables, and therefore it is at most necessary to see how their prices are behaving. Out of the total amount paid by the consumers for consumption of these vegetables, 25 to 30% of the amount can reach the farmers, and therefore you find that the way cost of production is rising for these three particular products, farmers are not getting remunerative price to the extent they are paying the cost, and therefore you find their incomes are also falling. So these three crops are pretty scattered, not grown in one particular area. So potato price volatility spillovers to other potato markets apart from the impact of past price volatility. So we try to work out with the model that how the past price behavior affect the current price behavior of certain products by using lag modeling. And that is how you find that past prices, they play an important role in affecting the production of this year's price, and when this year's production goes up, you find its effect again on the price. That is how volatility starts, mainly because of mismatch between the supply and demand due to change in the Rabi and Kharif crops and the kind of problems associated with these two seasons and its impact on the productivity of the crops. So that is how the changes are taking place in the other markets. Next one. So this is the mean and standard deviation of the wholesale prices of top, that is January 2014 to April 2025. We try to work out what is the average price of these three crops, which particular crops prices are more volatile than the other crop, and then we try to analyze that if that particular crop is having less amount of standard deviation, where you find that more or less the prices are stabilized compared to other two crops, then we have to see that what steps you find that farmers or government they have taken in order to stabilize the prices and can it be extended to other two crops. And therefore this exercise we did it for these three crops, and that is how you find the mean of the tomato prices, mean of the onion prices and mean of the potato prices along with standard deviation. Next point. So the figure, it ultimately indicates that mean and standard deviation for the period 2014 to 2025. For potato it is the lowest, 17.13, that is the mean value. Onion prices 23 rupees and slightly higher mean value of tomato prices, and that is how you find the behavior of these three commodities prices, where standard deviation provides insights into long-term volatility. So their prices have standard deviation close to near about 10, whereas potato prices are the least volatile with standard deviation of around 5. And therefore we try to analyze that what can be done for these two crops, where farmers they should not come with protest and they should not throw their vegetables on street. So what needs to be done, and the way potato prices are stabilized, can it be stabilized for other two crops? That is one way of looking at the policy framework for these three vegetables. Next one. So these are the tomato prices and its volatility. Next one. I will go slightly faster. So tomato prices they are seen usually fluctuate between 20 to 40, and price usually tend to increase in the early monsoon season, June, August, and this is exactly what is happening now. So as I said, yesterday only I checked it in the market, prices are above 100 in some cases for the tomato. So elevated prices are also seen in the post-monsoon period, likely due to reduced supply due to probable excess rainfall or flooding in late monsoon. This is what we are going to experience now. In some parts of the state, you have excess rains. In some parts of the state, you don't have rains. And therefore, that affects again the prices. So volatility and the fluctuations, they are represented by the rolling standard deviation, broadly mirror the upward price fluctuations. Next. This is related to the onion price volatility. The data I got up to April 25, and that is how we have shown the changes which are taking place. Next point. So onion prices display again the frequent and sharp fluctuations moving between rupees 10 and 60 per kg, with pronounced spikes in mid-2015, late 2019 and early 2020. So they are usually more stable during summer and post-monsoon months. Sharp prices hike, however, usually occur during November to January, likely due to delayed kharif harvest, erratic rainfall and spoilage of stored onions. So a significant spike, however, can be seen during late 2019, rupees 74 per kg, but then the prices decline, stabilize. So you can see the variations from 20 rupees to 74 rupees for certain product, and that is how you find its effect on the purchasing power of the individuals. Next one. So production of onion sensitive to one period lag price. So as I said, that how the past prices affect the production, how the past prices affect the present prices. So researchers, they can work in still better manner, but this also is the factor which needs to be examined. So it is observed that production of onion is susceptible to one period lag price index. And when the last year's price index is showing some favorable response, you will find that farmers, they would start growing that particular product because of lag price. And therefore, simple linear regression of the production of onion on the WPA of onion, it shows a unit increase in price index of onion results in 0.06 million hectares rise in the area under production in the following time period, and that is how this simple regression is used. So it is found that it is highly significant with 0.58 as R, and annual data for the period were sourced from the various issues of agriculture statistics at a glance, and that data is considered. This is time period data. So the logic behind this is that when you analyze it, you find that how much is the contribution which that particular lag price is making in affecting the production of the current year's price. Next please. Now this is relating to the potato prices, again how the changes are taking place in that. Then this is potato price volatility, and there you find that compared to other crops, this particular product shows some stability at certain level. Next. So notable prices, sir, they are seen during mid-2020 and the pronounced increase in potato prices in mid-2020, and that is how it has the lowest volatility among the top categories, and it has a greater processing to production share and high storage capacity. Compared to other two products, probably this particular product is less perishable, and that could be the reason where you find that volatility is less, and storage facilities are also available to a great extent for this particular product. Of course, this has some political implications also. As we find everything is linked to politics, similarly, this part is also linked with politics. In certain cases, in some states, wherever you find that the production is taking place, you find that they don't sell it to other states, and then other states face the problem. That is also happening every now and then. Then we try to use the same methodology suggested by the Cost and Price Commission, and we try to find out that if we use those components for this product, then what would be the scenario. So then we take A1 cost of cultivation. So A1 cost, it includes actual expenditure incurred during cultivation and includes major components. And this we did it state-wise. Wherever you find that these two products are growing, we try to analyze that what is the human labor cost, material cost, fertilizers cost relating to these particular products, and those items are considered about human labor, machine labor, fertilizers, irrigation charges, interest on working and fixed capital, and among the major operational costs, we focus this analysis as human labor, machine labor, seed and fertilizer and manure. And then we try to analyze that how the cost is rising and how much is the price farmers are getting relating to that cost of production. Next one. So there you find the even cost of cultivation. So cost of cultivation for onion in major producer states. So these are the states where you find that in majority the states are growing onion, and this is the cost of cultivation for potato, and how these costs varies from state to state. So in some states you find that the cost of overall cost of cultivation is low, but in some states it is high, and these variations are mainly due to the labor cost, and that labor cost worked out in relation with the states also. Next one. So the major producer states of onion and potato, you find that the cost of cultivation of onion is the highest for Tamil Nadu, lowest for Karnataka, and for potato the price is lowest in Bihar and highest for Gujarat. And that is how we found the gap between the lowest cost state is very high for both onions and potatoes, and therefore this cost of cultivation for these three crops, it varies considerably, and driving force behind the cost price is also different from top. So in addition to variability of cost of cultivation across the state, highly perishable and small duration nature of these crops, inadequate cold storage, infrastructure and adverse impact of changing weather conditions impact the supply of top and give rise to considerable price volatility which varies over season. Of course, lot of different policies are framed by Ministry of Food Processing Industries, Operation Green Scheme, which is launched in 2018. Good amount of budget is allocated for that. I won't go in detail, but what we found that this Operation Green Scheme launched in 2018 with good amount of budget, but if we see the actual expenditure incurred for storage facilities of these three crops, you find there is a huge gap between allocation and the actual expenditure made. If time permits, we will go in those details also, but for a time being, let us try to find out that whatever the steps we find under Operation Green or what is called as Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana, and under that scheme you find that the idea is to bring stability, but unfortunately after 2018 also what we observe that fluctuations and volatility in the commodities prices, particularly for these three, it is continuing. Next one. Next point. So cost of cultivation, these are the major components, and state-wise you can see how much is the cost incurred for human labor, machine labor, seed, fertilizer and manure. This is mainly for these two crops we got, that is onion and potato, and then we try to analyze it further, that how there is a interlinkages between the different kinds of components of cost. Next one. So this is A1 cost and major components of cost and their correlations. So this is relating to human labor, machine labor, seed, fertilizer and manure, and how they are related with the overall total cost of production. That is what we consider as A1 cost. So the correlation of the A1 cost with its component for onion, it shows the highest correlation in the case of seeds, followed by human labor. In case of potatoes, correlation for the same year was the highest with seeds, followed by fertilizers and manure, and correlation with the cost incurred on human labor was the lowest. So top comprise a significant component of the vegetable basket of the consumers, and the major point is it is demand inelastic. And because it is demand inelastic, you find that even though the prices are rising, you find the pressure of demand, it continues. So many a times suggestions come that why people not stopping eating onion, or why people do not stop eating tomatoes. That is not happening because it has that kind of inelastic demand, giving us the higher prices for the commodities in spite of the fact that prices are rising beyond a certain limit. Next point. So these are the major producer states and cost of cultivation, and this is how it is indicated that where these three particular crops they are grown in which particular part of the country. Next one. So this impact of top prices on food inflation, this was determined by using autoregressive distributed lag model, and that captures both long-term and short-term effects of top price changes on food inflation. So the model shows a better long-run relationship between top prices and CPI headline, excluding top price index, suggesting that variables tend to move together in the long run despite short-term fluctuations. So a unit rise of top prices leads to 0.75 unit increase in CPI headline, and therefore the point which I am trying to make that we have to focus on these three commodities because these are the responsible commodities and these are the culprits for bringing higher food inflation, higher vegetable prices in the market. So the short-term effects indicate that prices impact HPI, that is a consumer price index headline, excluding top inflation with a significant convergence speed of around 13.7%. This is how we got the result from the autoregressive distributed lag model. What kind of market structure is emerging for these three commodities? So markets for onion, potatoes can be described as oligopolies due to regional concentration in production, and obviously there is a possibility that as suppliers they function in the oligopoly market, more or less similar kind of ways of determining the prices take place in this market. So there is a possibility of having cartels of producers of these products. So presence of a few large and dominant producers, distributors and retailers with significant market presence. So tomato markets are generally considered to be monopolistic competition as there are many farm producers usually featuring many producers, and therefore you find that there is less chances of having clusters, of having coming together of all these producers, because that is the product which is grown in most of the other places of the country. Therefore market structures differ as far as that particular product is concerned. Next one. So important considerations for pricing. General considerations are seasonal variability, weather conditions, transportation, logistics, supply chain inefficiencies, export-import policies. Short-term are price stabilization measures where demand-linked production, Operation Green, as I told you, that can play an important role if it is implemented in the most effective manner. Then frequent interventions to deal with glut or deficits in production, and long-term is integrated development of organized value chain, transportation and storage, post-harvest management. So there is a need to have intervention not only from the central government side by way of policy making, but from states also, where you have those products grown in significant manner. So what are the challenges and the way forward? So production is regional, but consumption is national, and therefore that part also needs to be considered. Difference in cost of cultivation across regions, difference in inflation rate across regions. So strengthening existing government interventions, there is a possibility of having price stabilization fund. So if farmers are not getting proper price and if they are throwing on the street, then that time there is a need to have the intervention, maybe with the help of the Operation Green, where some kind of protection can be given to the farmers by way of price stabilization fund. Subsidize imports. So whenever this situation occurs, we can relax the import part where we can have more import. Export can be banned in a situation when your prices are rising in the domestic market and some kind of market regulation is required. The point is that whenever these kinds of fluctuations occur, things cannot be entirely left to the market mechanism. There has to be intervention from the government in order to bring protection to the farmers, at the same time to give some kind of protection to the consumers also. Next one. So these are the sources of data. For those who are more interested, they can refer this document, and whatever the information so far I have shown, it is shown from these particular sources. So these sources can be used in order to find out further details relating to the prices of these three commodities. So basically, when we focus attention on these three particular products, so price it gets triggered, and for that you need intervention. So that is how government policies can help to stabilize the problem. Of course, further we also try to develop MSP formula for these three particular commodities as developed by Swaminathan Committee for other products on the similar lines. We try to find out that can there be MSP price for these three products also, and for that we have developed formula for these three commodities. Because of paucity of time, I won't go into those details, but if there are any question, I will try to answer them. So, yeah, sure. So thank you so much.
So as we see the scenario, farmers are growing the goods, but the traders are getting richer and richer. Farmers, as well as a lot of holding as far as onion and potato commodities are concerned. So any policies are adopted or being adopted in this regard?
Actually, this is the question not only related to these three commodities, but in general. You find that traders, middlemen, they derive maximum benefit. And the theoretical part, if we talk about the inclusive growth and sharing of income with all, that again remains a dream. The reason being that basically, as I said there, that there is no coordination with all these factors. What is happening, that our observation is, wherever farmers are organized, and like Farmers Producers Organization, FPOs, that is the concept which is now developed, and there are some success stories. But it is not extended in general for all. So it is restricted for some few areas where leadership helps them to come together. So if they come together and if they decide to sell jointly without having intervention of the middleman, then there is a possibility that traders, they can of course involve traders in the process, but at the same time farmers will be benefited in that whole marketing chain. At the moment what is happening, that everything is left to the traders, and therefore one of the important points which need to be considered is whatever the price we pay for the product, hardly 10 to 20% it goes to the farmers. And as you rightly pointed out, major share it is with the traders. It is mainly because if they start organizing in a proper manner, then only there is a possibility that they will have some say in the whole pricing process. That's why if they are not organizing, then government has to do it.
Earlier, the government has started such centers to procure these commodities directly from the farmers. But their volume is so much, they could not manage with it, they could not sell it. So those problems are there again with the farmers.
Actually, one model which our Buldhana Credit Cooperative Society has developed, and I feel that can be implemented. They are making available warehouses, and they can, farmers can store their commodities in warehouse. For whatever the period they are having storage, they get free interest rate loan, and there basically the commodities which they are storing, that becomes a sort of what you can say mortgage against the loan which those cooperative banks are giving. So if it is extended and if these facilities are used for other areas, probably there will be some control in the population. And that is a good model which I have seen, that is Buldhana Cooperative Bank. They are not only providing loan, but they are providing warehousing facilities also. And for that, loans are given to the farmers.
Since we're talking about tomato, onion, and potato prices, and we saw that data, the standard deviation was the least for potato prices. means the least variation in prices in potato. So just a thought, it came into mind that if we see in India, particularly there's a lot of contract farming for potatoes.
Right.
So can that be a reason? Because it is fixed price in advance. So can that be a reason that the prices, of course the storage is more for potato, but can that be a reason that the variability in the prices is less? And if we can investigate on it, then probably we can extend this model for onions and tomatoes also.
Right.
Because
What happened to potato actually, especially I am talking about Gujarat. In Gujarat, they have perpetual farming, and where the farmers have direct link with Lays and all these companies for the potato chip. And therefore, this is also the another good point which we have actually noted, that wherever you have processing, wherever there is a possibility of processing, your price gets stabilized.
because it's advanced.
Because that particular responsibility is taken by these big companies. And that is how even using drone for manuring and all these kinds of activities, it is done by those companies, not by the farmers. So their cost of production in some states you find is lower than the other states, is because of the kind of contract which they have made with these companies. And companies will take care of from even growing till plucking up. And that is how the whole chain is ultimately with the companies, and that is how company takes care of. Therefore you find the kind of quality and other things that matter for that company.
Because,
So this is again a good point in
because
order
we can take, because these days food processing is another area which the government is looking into. So if, for example, tomatoes, if they can be procured through
they are
contract
also
farming and
they are
processing,
also doing it, but not to the extent, because variations are more quality
they require
of
standardization.
yes, that is more compared to potato.
But probably then,
Otherwise that is a good product for further processing like soup and other kinds of things.
and
So,
exported also.
in some states you find that, but it is not to the extent you find with potato. Therefore prices
Because there are onions also.
onions also there.
They are perishable.
Basically whenever processing takes place, for onion also there is a chance of having processing. But the unit establishing for onion is much costlier than the other. And the companies are not coming forward for that particular.
I think we can go for value addition products. So they have encouraged that Patanjali and all, they have says, and the government is encouraging that. Maybe such type of thing we can think of for other crops also.
Of course, that also we can. Another thing which I think we should look at, many times people say, and even on the basis of the lag prices which we have shown, people try to cultivate that particular product wherever they get the price. But bringing change in that cropping pattern is so difficult that you don't get the result. We always talk about that in climate change, there must be change in the cropping pattern. And then in the morning when Dr. Sukhadeo Thorat was talking about how the inequalities are growing. Inequalities growing not at the individual level, but at the regional level also. Like we always say, that sugarcane requires huge amount of water. Rice requires water. But for other products, you find that they are not using water to the extent sugarcane are using. And therefore, many times we say that in Maharashtra, specifically in western Maharashtra, here we talk about Thimbak Yojana, that is pani jala pahiye khal parayanta, and we say it is deep irrigation. But there in Maharashtra, it is not deep irrigation, but it is a kind of the irrigation system which is called as Dubak Yojana. So Dubak Yojana means they will just put the water in the palm, and then by standing on the bank of the palm, they will throw stone and they will find that whether water is filled or not. So once the water is filled up and when it makes a sound as dub, then they will say that now it is a time to stop the motor power. That is how the water excessively is used, and salinity problem you find in Ahmednagar and all this process, it is mainly because of sugarcane, and no farmer wants to bring any change in the cropping pattern. So when we enter in this kind of contractual farming, and then by observing that these are the areas where you can have products which can be demanded by Patanjali or other kinds of companies, but it is restricted for the specific areas. That is the biggest problem, because bringing change in the crop is not an easy task, and they don't want also. Even if you try, then it is very difficult to go for that kind of change. Even here, rice, so they don't want to bring any change in that, and that is how you find that having some additional crops apart from the core crops, it is very difficult to get it implemented, unless you provide solid subsidies in order to encourage that kind of cropping practice. This is the experience of most of the states.
May I ask one more? In villages, there are few farmers left having 5 acres of land. 10 acres in just 1 or 2 in a village. 5 acres, maybe 5, 6. So rest of the 90% of the farmers are having the land, say 1 acre, 2 acre, 3 acres, simply like that. So are there any efforts by the government that the organized farming can be started?
I think it's a very relevant question, because when we talk about scale and when we talk about economies of scale, what is the viable size of the farm in today's situation? Considering the technology, use of tractors, use of drones, so what is the viable size? So estimates suggest that viable size would be around 8 acres. And if you have 8 acres of land, you can make best use of technology. What is happening, farm size is going down, and it is hardly 2.5 acres on an average now. The solution to the problem is not what government can do, but I will tell you that in certain places, like in Punjab, you have the rice farming, and there Nilokedi is the village which I visited, and Nilokedi village is, even you find in textbooks which is mentioned that how Nilokedi is functioning. Nilokedi, what they did, that all the farmers they come together, and you find rice farm particularly huge amount of land, and jointly they are organizing all the technological and practice organization. So it is owned not by the individual, but they are using it jointly, and therefore that kind of farming system, if it is developed, and Punjab is the best, Haryana, Nilokeri is in Haryana. So Nilokeri is the best example where you find that all these farmers they come together. Our problem in some of the states is that they have fear that even if they are having 1 acre or 2 acres of land, they feel that my ownership, whether it will come in trouble if I operate with some other person, and that is the biggest issue. Even if you don't do anything, but having ownership of land itself gives the pleasure to the farmer, and that is what is happening. People are working at different places, but having land, but that land is not cultivated. That is the basic problem. But if it is cultivated jointly, then probably the situation will be different. And government, in fact, can give some kind of incentives in order to come together. And there are some places where that process has started, but it is very slow. But Nilokeri has been functioning. When we studied agriculture economics, that time Nilokeri's example was quoted in the books. Sadhu and Sin's book, it was there. So that is how it is popularized. Some more detail, because these are just the glimpses which I could show it to you, and other things can also be discussed in detail later on. So thank you so much, and thankful to the organizers for giving me this opportunity. Yes, please.
जी, मेरे एक्चुअली 2 प्रश्न हैं। मेरा पहला प्रश्न आपसे ये है कि हाल ही में मैंने एक न्यूज़ देखा जिसमें कि एक किसान ने खेती किया था कॉलीफ्लावर की, तो उसकी खेती उसको दाम नहीं मिल रहा था, उसका 1 रुपए के प्रति भाव से उसका कॉलीफ्लावर जा रहा था। मैं मानता हूँ कि यहाँ टोमेटो, ऑनियन और पोटैटो की बात हो रही है, लेकिन कई सारी सब्जियाँ भी हैं। मैं एक एग्जाम्पल ले रहा हूँ। तो बाकी सब तो उससे कमा रहे थे, आगे का जो प्रोसेस हो रहा था, लेकिन किसान को 1 रुपए के भाव से जा रहा था, तो उसने अपनी पूरी खेती ध्वस्त कर दिया। तो इसके लिए हम क्या कर सकते हैं इस स्थिति में? और दूसरा प्रश्न मेरा ये है कि आज का जैसा देश उन्नति कर रहा है, विज्ञान बहुत उन्नति कर रहा है, तो ऐसे उन्नति वाले युग में जहाँ बहुत सारे प्रकार के आ रहे बायोटेक्निकल, जैसे कि बीटी ब्रिंजल और बीटी कॉटन जैसी चीज़ें हैं, तो भारत उस क्षेत्र में ज़्यादा उन्नति नहीं कर रहा है। तो इसका क्या कारण है, और इस पे आप अपने विचार स्पष्ट कीजिए। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
मेरी जो क्या बोलेंगे कैपेसिटी है वो उतना उसको अच्छे ढंग से शायद मैं आपके सामने नहीं पेश कर पाऊँगा। पर आपने जो पहला सवाल पूछा कि उसको खेती को वो जो कॉलीफ्लावर ग्रो कर रहा था, गेट सफिशिएंट प्राइस, ये इसमें ऐसा है कि हर बार हम बोलते हैं कि ये जो फार्मर जो खेती करता है वो निर्भर रहता है पूरे निसर्ग पे, और उसके बेसिस पे अभी भी वही बात हम करते हैं, बिकॉज ऑलवेज वी टॉक अबाउट कि गवर्नमेंट इंटरवेंशन यहाँ होना चाहिए, वहाँ होना चाहिए, बट इस टाइप का प्रोटेक्शन फार्मर्स को मिले, इसलिए हमने एक सजेशन ऐसा दिया है कि ऐसा जब होता है तो देयर हैज टू बी ए सेपरेट फंड, एक अलग से निधि ऐसी सिचुएशन में फार्मर्स के लिए स्टेट लेवल पे, ग्राम पंचायत लेवल पे जाना चाहिए। हमारे यहाँ प्रॉब्लम क्या हो रहा है, हम बोलते हैं कि एग्रीकल्चर इज अ स्टेट सब्जेक्ट, बट काफ़ी जो पॉलिसी बनती है वो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट पे लेवल पे बनती है, और फिर वो टसल होती है सेंट्रल और स्टेट गवर्नमेंट। जैसा हमने इसका एक्सपीरियंस फार्मर्स के जो स्ट्राइक हुए हरियाणा और पंजाब फार्मर्स के दिल्ली में, तब हमने इसका अनुभव लिया। इशू रहता है स्टेट का और वो जाता है नेशनल लेवल पे। सिमिलरली डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन करके if funds are provided at the local level, at the ग्राम पंचायत लेवल, और इंश्योरेंस मेनली बात बहुत हुई इंश्योरेंस के बारे में, बट इंश्योरेंस का ऐसा है कि नेशनल लेवल या स्टेट लेवल पे भी लाना बड़ा मुश्किल है, क्योंकि इंश्योरेंस बोलता है कि एक ही फार्मर को यदि नुकसान हुआ तो उसको इंश्योरेंस देना मुश्किल ये होगा कि पानी यदि गिरता है तो पानी पूरे खेतों में गिरता है, बाकी लोगों में भी गिरता है, तो इसलिए वो एक यदि फार्मर फेस कर रहा है तो उसके लिए इंश्योरेंस नहीं रहेगा, उसके लिए एक अलग से फंड रखने की आवश्यकता है, डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन करके ग्राम पंचायत लेवल, तो ही ये समस्या कुछ हद तक सुलझाई जा सकती। नहीं तो इंश्योरेंस के माध्यम से यदि बोलो तो उसकी कंडीशन जो है वो आप यदि देखेंगे तो ऐसा लगेगा आपको कि ये पॉलिसी इम्प्लीमेंट ही होना मुश्किल है। ऐसी स्थिति इंश्योरेंस की है, इसलिए क्रॉप इंश्योरेंस और प्रधानमंत्री किसान बीमा योजना वो सब है, बट ऐसे जब सिचुएशन आती है तब अपने पास इमीडिएटली प्रोटेक्शन देने के लिए यदि डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन उस स्तर पे हुआ तो शायद ये प्रॉब्लम छूट सकेगा। आपका दूसरा सवाल जो था बीटी कॉटन या बीटी जो टेक्नोलॉजी है उस पर बहुत सारी बातें इस पे हुई, बहुत सारे एनजीओज सामने आए, और बार बार बात अपने यहाँ होती है कि इसके वजह से खेती में बहुत सारे प्रॉब्लम्स हो रहे हैं। उसका सॉल्यूशन ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग करके निकाला गया। अभी ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग यदि आपने किया तो उसकी कॉस्ट और उसका होने वाला प्रोडक्शन और सप्लाई उतने लेवल पे नहीं हो सकता, ये भी लोगों ने रियलाइज किया, और इसलिए बीटी फार्मिंग जो हो रहा है, ब्रिंजॉल बोलो, कॉटन में बोलो, कॉटन में तो इतना प्रॉब्लम बाद में आया, बट फिलहाल जरूरी ये है कि इसको हम बैलेंसिंग कैसा करें। ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग ये एकदम से होगा नहीं, इट विल टेक टाइम, और धीरे धीरे लोग उसकी तरफ जा रहे हैं, बट कंसिडरिंग द टोटल कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन एंड द प्राइसिंग वो बहुत ही मिसमैच हो रहा है, और इसलिए हम अच्छा लगता है कि ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग फूड खाना चाहिए, पर प्रॉब्लम ये है कि कितने लेवल तक हम उसको सप्लाई कर पाएंगे, और इसलिए एरियाज आइडेंटिफाई करना, कहाँ पे ऑर्गेनिक फार्मिंग कम कॉस्ट में हो सकता है, इसका थोड़ा सा रिसर्च होना जरूरी है, और कितना हम उसमें से रियली प्रोडक्शन निकाल सकते हैं। और इसलिए मैं समझता हूँ कि ये पूरे सेक्टर को विकेंद्रीकरण के तरफ ले जाके ही ये समस्याएं सुलझा सकती है। नेशनल लेवल पे यदि आपने बोला कि क्लाइमेट चेंज हो रहा है तो ये सब करना चाहिए, तो लोकल सिचुएशन इज इंटायरली डिफरेंट। कहाँ पानी आता है, कहाँ नहीं आता है। विद इन स्टेट सोलापुर समान जगह ऐसी है कि वहाँ पे पूरा क्लाउडिंग सिचुएशन दिखती है तो बारिश बरसती नहीं है। ऐसा सोलापुर एक्सपीरियंस कर रहा है। काफ़ी बार विदर्भ का कुछ हिस्सा भी ऐसा ही होता है। इसलिए लोकल पॉलिसीज, लोकल इंस्टीट्यूट्स, लोकल ट्रेनिंग सेंटर्स, दे नीड टू बी डेवलप्ड इन ऑर्डर टू गिव प्रोटेक्शन टू द पावर। तभी ये माइक्रो लेवल पे जाके ही मैक्रो रिजल्ट एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर में मिल सकते हैं।
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
मैंने कितना आपका समाधान किया मालूम है, बट ऐसी मेरा क्या ऐसा है इसके बारे में। थैंक यू सो मच।
Moving on to the next section, it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest, Professor Elumalai Kannan. Professor Elumalai Kannan is a professor at Center for Study of Regional Development, JNU, New Delhi. He specializes in agriculture and institutional economics, applied econometrics, and rural non-farm employment. Through his teaching and research, he has significantly advanced knowledge in the field of agricultural development and has guided numerous research scholars in their academic journey. Sir will be highlighting the topic India's agriculture at a crossroad, challenges and strategies for development.
My special thanks goes to Dr. Kidu Joseph. Been good friend and you requested me that I should be here. I know I am standing in between your lunch and this presentation. Let me try how I can hold your attention to this presentation for the next 30 minutes. So as you know, India's agriculture has come a long way since the mid-1960s. With the introduction of green revolution technologies. The green revolution technology has helped to increase the food production in particular, and India achieved self-sufficiency in food grain production. Although at the macro level it is fine, but there are issues at the household level, ensuring food and nutritional security. Since 1990s, say over the last 3 decades, India's agriculture has been under neglect. There is no long-term policy focus with respect to sustaining India's agricultural growth. And the approach to any particular problem, for example, the Vidarbha region of Maharashtra, has been a piecemeal approach, not a holistic approach, and hence the India's agriculture sector is at a crossroad and finding a way which direction it should go. And hence my presentation here will throw light on different dimensions of India's agriculture sector, not specific to one particular aspect, but range of the issues which I'm going to discuss here, starting with growth, agricultural growth, natural resources, agricultural markets and trade and so on, right? So this broad brush, not specific to a particular research team which I'm going to speak on. So let me start with a question, that is India's agricultural transformations complete? There are theories in economics, in development economics, like one such theory was proposed by C.P. Timmer, a Harvard economist, who had articulated that agriculture will be indistinguishable from any other sectors of economy, provided it fulfills certain conditions. What are these conditions? The share of agriculture in national GDP and the labor will go down. The contribution or the share of the household budget in the overall consumption expenditure will be less than 20%. more importantly, the sector will be integrated with the overall macroeconomy through improved infrastructures, product and factor market linkages. This is a crucial aspect of making the agriculture sector indistinguishable from any other sectors of the economy. Once these conditions are fulfilled, and so agriculture reaches the matured stage of development. And this is what. Let me place this India's agriculture within this the theoretical framework. Now, if you look at India's agriculture GDP, and the share of agriculture in India's GDP has declined consistently, and so was the share of the labor in agriculture. But the rate at which the importance of agriculture in national income has fallen, not in commensuration with the drop in the labor force, right? I think that's a big concern. And then if you look at the household food consumption expenditure, still accounts for about 46% of overall household consumption expenditure. The product market, the factor markets are still disintegrated, and there are government interventions in different forms, both at the domestic level as well as the external front, to protect the sector, particularly to meet twin objectives. One is food security and nutrition security, the other is price stabilization. To achieve these two objectives, historically, the government made interventions both in domestic markets as well as the international markets. Right? So given this, the fact that the sector is not fully integrated with the macroeconomy, and we see a lot of distortions in the sector, and hence the huge disparity in the development of agriculture sector. The typical example is Maharashtra. Like you see islands of prosperities and then deprivations in many parts of the state. So is in other states like Karnataka is also an example of this process. Now, having said this, let us look at the growth, agricultural growth, over a long period of time. And you might have read, the students of economics or the discipline might have read the literature, or you will come across the news articles saying that the agricultural growth has always been volatile. Right? Volatile. The volatility in growth implies that the farmer's income are unstable. There is a greater degree of instability in farmer's income, and also the other agrarian classes associated with the cultivation is related to the volatility in the growth, and hence investment in agriculture, motivation to invest in agriculture and adopt improved technology has always remained subdued because of this volatility. Hence, the state intervention, the government intervention is required, unlike other sectors of the economy. But if you dissect a bit further, say if you look at the last, say, the recent decades, right, about, say, if you divide it into the period, say, the first 10 years and the recent 10 years, and then the previous 10 years period, and how has been agricultural growth in these two different time periods? Because there is a clear-cut policy change, and hence these two time periods that we have. The crop, so if you look at the agriculture sector, it has a different components. We have the crop economy, it's called crop agriculture, and then we have livestock, forestry and logging, and we have fishing, an important component of the overall economy. The importance of the crop sector has come down over time. It just accounts for 50% of the total value of output generated in the sector. But what is interesting in the overall agricultural economy is the growth of the livestock sector, driven by the two commodities, the milk and meat. Among the milk is an important player, driving growth within the livestock sector. Right? Now there are evidence which shows that the supply is in consonance with, congruence with the demand, the changes in the demand taking place, consumption demand taking place in the economy, and hence the production of the livestock commodities are increasing. Right? But contrarily, if you look at the consumption by quartiles or deciles, and the staples, cereals still constitutes a significant proportion of the overall consumption of the household as compared to the livestock products. So national level picture is one, but the household level still, the people have access to this kind of commodities remain problematic because of the fall in effective income. The fall in effective demand, a real income, is a serious significant issue to match with the supply and demand. Right? And this takes us to discussions. The growth, 3.7%, it's a fantastic growth to see in agriculture sector. That close to 4% is really a robust growth in agriculture sector. But how did this growth translate into the income, household income, right? And it is surprising to see in 16 years' time, say 2002 to 2018, the change in the real income between these 16 years is just from 4,000 rupees to 6,800 rupees per household. Imagine a household comprising an average of 4 members. You divide this 6,000 rupees by 4. How much you get? And this is the level of income that farmers get. Why not the frustration? And what is the motivation for them to invest in new technology? Just an increase of about 1.6 times between this 2 time period. Now, given this fact, what about the number of people who are associated with, as we just mentioned, look at the BLFS and periodic labor force survey and national, the NSS, previously it was employment and income situation allowance conducted by NSS. 49% of the female workers are still tied up with agriculture, either directly or indirectly, and 77% of the female workers are in agriculture. Now that's a point I want to make, that the household income of 6,000 rupees divided by the number of persons associated with the sector, and you just get a meager income per household per person. And this clearly shows there is a divergence in the income between agricultural and the non-agriculture sector. Look at the non-agriculture sector, particularly tertiary sector, services, right? It's a booming, right? And then that's also the reason why youth like you, as young students, no longer interested to go back to agriculture and work because the income is not in line with the amount of effort that you make. That's the reason. Hence, again, the interventions by the government and the state, it is still better. Therefore, what the point here is, there is a huge disparity in the income between agriculture and the non-agriculture sector. That's the point I want. Now then, how do we explain these changes in the growth and the income? So what are the parameters which we can, use to explain this pattern? And what are the challenges here? That how do we address these challenges? That's where some of the indicators that will be used to look at it. And also the productive resources like land and water to see who has access to these resources and how they utilize it. Capital expenditure is an important, the part of it is important for improving, say, irrigation infrastructure, or making, the assets productive, creating productive assets in the rural areas or within the agriculture sector. There was a steep increase in the capital expenditure. So in the initial 8 years, starting from 2001 to 2008-9, and there was a slump in the capital expenditure. And then from 14-15 onwards, the government invested in the agriculture sector. Unfortunate to note that in the recent time it has fallen. So the fall in the capital expenditure, which is meant to create a productive asset within the agriculture sector, has been falling. And therefore it has implications for the growth, sustaining the growth momentum. Right? And then, does this falling capital expenditure has any relation with the productivity growth? Now, how do we capture the productivity growth? There are different ways to measure the productivity growth. There are partial productivity measures and there is something called total factor productivity measure. the total factor productivity, that's called TFP, which takes into account all the inputs, as Professor Deshpande has shown, different inputs like labor, machine labor, human labor, seed, fertilizers, and all the inputs are combined together. That makes us the input index. And then all the outputs, like there are main products, main output like paddy, grind, straw is a byproduct. Combine them together, that makes us the output index. Then division of output index by the input index gives the TFP index. So what is quite discomforting is that green line, which was more or less rising over time, but the recent years it started falling, which means there is a problem. And you also related this with the capital expenditure, which is also falling. And then the productivity, total factor productivity is actually started slowing down or falling, which is not a good sign for the sector. And therefore, there is a need to pay attention to these signs which is emerging, that and they get corrective measures, that how do we restore or increase the total factor productivity growth, because the productivity-led growth is sustainable in the long run rather than price-led or input-led growth. Or input intensification is not a important source of growth. Right? Now this takes us to the productive resources. In that case, let us understand what are the productive resources, and who has access to the resource, and how this resource is utilized. Right? So we are going to discuss two important resources, namely land and the irrigation water, land and water. Right? Now this is some of the work which I have been doing. If you look at the access to productive resource, there's a huge disparity among the different social categories. Right? Agriculture, this is the unit level data from NSS data, from National Sample Survey, which clearly shows that socially advantaged the group or agricultural households, they are basically others, are called as the forward caste, or the upper caste. The average size of operational holding is much higher than that of socially disadvantaged agricultural households like SC, ST, right? Among them, the average size of operational holdings for SC household is much smaller than the other groups. Now, if this directly relates to the percentage of land leased in, since the average size of land held or operated by the SC household is smaller, and they lease in more amount of land to increase the scale of farming. And again, there are ample evidence to show that the tenancy relation is not benign. It's always exploitative, and hence they depend on the land lease market, and hence they tend to be more exploited by the land owning class. I think that's an important point to know. And also the access to the irrigation as well. Now this problem is slightly amplified if you look at the share of the population in the total agricultural households in rural areas, and the percentage of land operated by them. Now look at the others, which is socially advantaged, the caste groups or the agricultural households. They account for about 24% of the overall agricultural households in India. So 24% control 30% of the operated area. And look at the SC households, they account for 16% of the overall agricultural population, operate only 10% of them. So this shows how unequal is the distribution of the operated area among the different social groups, right? And hence, again, for the intervention to correct these measures, right? So given this skewed distribution of land across the different cultivating households, and there are other problems emerging at the macro level. So I'm trying to bring evidence from both from micro level and macro level to construct this a consistent story. So if you look at, so given these skewed distributions, and there are problems emerging at the macro level, and there is increased competition for the land, right? You might have seen Mumbai, how it's expanding, Delhi, how it's expanding, Bangalore, all the cities are expanding. The expansion of cities require land. Where the land will come from? Only agriculture can release the land for the expanding cities. Which means what's happening is the urbanization is dispossessing people, eliminating people from their land. And so, these are government statistics. It shows that from 1990, 1991 and 2024, roughly 7.5 million hectares of land gone out of agriculture towards a non-agricultural purpose, like industrial complexes, residential buildings. This is a very conservative estimate, but there are many field-based studies, like a recent study which I saw in Bihar, which is not urbanization, not so right, but it's saying that the amount of land taken away from agriculture is much faster, much higher. We also did a study in very urban areas of Bangalore. The rate at which the land is being diverted from agriculture to non-agriculture is quite high, surprisingly, right? So land is also going away, given the skew distributions and also these industrial developments. Of course, I'm not against industrialization, but converting fertile land and for using into residential purpose, residential building, industrial building is not a welcome thing, given the fact that productivity is also going down. So the increased diversion of land put that land under serious pressure, and therefore there is a pressure for increasing more output per unit of land, and the degradation, and there is also the process of degradation, because the intensive cultivation of land is also leading to degradation of the land. So Deshpande has mentioned many times that alkalization of soil is taking place, right, and putting a land cultivations, more than once, more than twice, thrice in a year, leads to falling fertility of the soil and so on, right. In addition to that, demographic pressure and all other factors also like overuse of chemicals and also lead to degradation. But what is unfortunate here is we don't have proper data. We don't have proper data on the extent of land degradation in India. That is a sad story, because we don't want to tell you that how much land is going away and how much is being degraded. Right? So this is a old estimate from Maithili, IJAD and Mumbai, and this shows 44%. I'm sure it's much more higher than that of this particular number. That is the story about the land. It's really under serious stress. So as with the irrigation water, right? Again, Deshpande and Thorat in the morning has mentioned times that how the groundwater is being exploited, right, and used for irrigations, and there is also competition emerging, not only for agriculture, from the non-agriculture sector, household consumption. Urbanization is fast expanding, already water is required. But within agriculture, if you look at it, the irrigated area expanded quite significantly from 25 million hectares to 82 million. It's a good sign, which means more and more cultivated land is brought under irrigation. Because irrigation is one thing, can play a trigger to rising productivity growth. Because where water is there, the growth is there, productivity is there. But what is happening is, the source of that water is the groundwater basin, which means you are extracting more and more of groundwater through competitive drilling. You know why? Because there is no property rights over the groundwater basin. Right? So Prof. Deshpande is also digging his land 500 feet, 400 feet. I am his neighbor. It's a competitive drilling. Oh, he put 700 feet. Let me put 1,000 feet. And then he again puts another borewell. So this competitive drilling, because there is no property rights defined over that resource, and hence this depletion of this resource, degradation of the resource. That's what exactly. And there are many areas already been declared as critical zones, like my home state, Tamil Nadu, is already crossed what is called the groundwater, in the stage of groundwater development, more than 100%, which means it reached a critical stage. There's a red spots that you see, which means amount of water extracted from the groundwater basin is much higher than the replenishable level, which means rechargeable level. So it is going to be a serious problem in future if this technology of extraction continues, right? Now, therefore, where we see the productivity fall, capital expenditure fall, and then the natural resources, productive resources like land and water is also serious stress, right? Now, but what happens to the markets? That's what the Timber had argued. Integration of the sector, the agriculture, the product and factor markets with the macroeconomy will have a smooth transfer of resources, a flow of resources between the sector. Like people will move, resources will move, capital will flow between the sector. Now there are many interventions or innovations launched by the government. I'm not going to discuss all of them. That already been mentioned, few of which already been mentioned by Deshpande. Like contract farming, it's a very great innovation. But you know, it's exclusionary in nature. There's ample evidence to show that marginal small farmers are excluded from these contract farming arrangements because it is self-selecting in nature. The large farmers, the capital-intensive farmers tend to participate in contract farming as compared to the small and marginal farmers because the capital base is low. Production is very tiny, and therefore the firms are not interested to have an agreement with the small farm, marginal farmer. And hence, so there are many such issues. I mean, what I can tell you, these programs are fantastic, no doubt about it. But the way it is being implemented, it's a serious problem. There's no checks and balance. Like FPO, it's a great initiative. What is the you bring the people together. It's a collective, right? Bring the people, collective decisions, collective action basically. Bring the farmers together and sell the products collectively, and therefore the bargaining power, right? And higher price they get. But FPO still remains a notional idea. Like we did the field work in Bihar, in many districts. When we asked members of FPO, a member here. The farmer is a member. The farmer himself did not know that he is a shareholder of that company. He is a FPO, FPC. Which means because there is a money, NABARD, seed capital, and there is right, the SFS. So that seed money is given, they register, get the money, and only name exists, but not effectively. But there are successful examples, I think, Deshpande. Very, very good examples. Working in Maharashtra, there are cases, they are doing very well, right? But many places, they don't do, right? And there are others, which are not doing the details. Like one study, along with my student, we did in Odisha, as a part of his MPhil dissertations, like electronic national agricultural markets. When it was introduced around 2016 or 17, there was a very big hype about it. Look, there is a one nation, one market, which means one price. And farmers sitting any part of the country can sell their product. Bidding takes place. The highest bidder gets the product. But look, the country, the domestic transport cost is much higher than that of the traveling from Nagpur to maybe Singapore. From Nagpur to my Coimbatore will be much higher than that of the traveling from to neighboring country. The transport cost is so high, infrastructure is so weak that this integrating that into one market, one nation, still remains problematic. So what was that? One of the objectives is the ENAM, Electronic National Agriculture Market, will reduce the price volatility, as I said, which means it's a one price, and therefore not much variation in the price. Now, along with my student, we did this analysis for Odisha. We found that a significant increase, which we did not expect, increase in the price volatility in the post-introduction of ENAM. That's statistically significant. We didn't introduce, we put that there. So, which means still most farmers sell outside this ENAM mandi. They're not going to the ENAM mandi. Still they are selling it, only tiny quantity going there, and hence numbers are small, hence the volatility price that we see there. So, price policy is an important part of the market, right? Therefore, the price policy directs the farmers what crops to grow, because it is expected price basically. It gives a signal to the price basically acts as a signal to the farmers that what crops to grow and what would be the price that the government has announced. And market players, the traders, is also signal to them that look, government has fixed the MSP, and therefore that is the floor price, minimum price. So going below that, it's very rare, and hence the government intervention has to be there in case it goes below that. Now what we found, the price policy still remains biased towards, tilted towards only a few commodities. Right. Effective implementation is another problem. Like rice, we kept the rice price as a numerator and then try to see other commodities. Like from the point of view of diversifications, it is not happening. Right. So, and therefore the price policy still remains biased towards only such select commodities. And this graph still outdated, but if you extend the series, you won't find much difference. Now, if you look at the ratio of the farm harvest price to the wholesale price, now what is the farm harvest price? Farm harvest price is the price received by the farmers at the farm gate, at the farm level. Wholesale price is the price received at the market. When the farmer takes the produce to the market, the price received is the wholesale price. So take it, the ratio of it remains lower than that, lower than 1. It's a less than 1, which means the price the farmers get at the market at the farm gate level is much lower, and therefore the income has that is problem, right? When we try to relate this with the micro evidence, it is true, and although at the macro level it's fine, but is it true at the micro level? Now if you look at the last three, the columns like price ratios or the deviation from the mean price across the social categories, as you can clear, it can be clear from this, that SC households, agricultural households, receive 560 rupees lower than that of the average price that otherwise should be available. Which means that there exists not only getting a fair price for the commodities, agricultural products, there exists a price discrimination as well. The point here is, again, it's a larger study which I am doing it along with the other colleagues. So it's basically the study is on that price, the cost-based discrimination in agricultural markets, the larger work that we are doing, the cost-based discrimination in agricultural markets. So it's the preliminary evidence shows that there exists discrimination in the market, that the socially disadvantaged cost groups get lower price than the higher cost groups. Right? But how does this translate into the consumer price? Right? How does this? So whether it has any effect on the consumer price? Of course, it has an effect on the consumer price, but which is depicted in terms of the volatility, especially price spikes. Particularly the wheat, the price spikes are much higher than that of the rice. Therefore, consumers are not better off as compared to the farmers. So which means, as somebody asked a question, that the traders are in between the consumers and the farmers are prospering better than the producers is true because of the price spread, because of the appropriation of the value between these two, right? So therefore, now this has implications for the overall, all these factors implications for the overall price spikes, price, the food inflation, Deshpande already mentioned. Now what is unfortunate now here is, we are seeing a new normal in prices. Now this is not my analysis from the economic survey, which means the commodity prices, agricultural commodity prices, has reached a level and tend to remain at the same level. They are not returning to original price level. This price is not reverting, it's not mean reversion, it's not reverting to original level. So remains at a higher level. So which means the agricultural commodity prices have become sticky. It is sticky, it's not going down to its original price. But this was a serious concern for the welfare of both producers as well as the consumers, right? This I am taking to the domestic markets, to the Trumpy effect. Now what happens to the Trump? Now as you know, we all must be reading, the Trump has put 25% initially tariff, now 50%, Now, will it have any implication for India's agricultural trade? There is going to be a serious problem. Right? There is going to be a significant problem with respect to the Trump's tariff. 150% comes into effect. Right? Now, what are the? So we are not, suppliers of many diverse agricultural commodities, but our exports are concentrated in few commodities. There is some degree of specialization of agricultural trade. Now look at rice, shrimp. Rice alone 19% of the total exports, followed by the shrimp. To the US, we mostly export the shrimps are the marine products, the shrimps and the frozen fish and like that. So our exports are mostly in these commodities. And if you look at the major export destinations, the US is the largest destination market for India's agricultural products, accounting for about 30%, much more than slightly if you extend the data. So it's not only for agricultural commodities, India also, the US is also an important destination market for the steel, aluminium, steel products, right? So therefore, this tariff, which has no meaning, which means it's also going to be a problem for the multilateral bodies like a WTO, which has no say in this. So given this fact that US is the largest export destination for our agricultural commodities, this new tariff is going to be a serious problem. Now this I say in relation to the statistics that we estimated for some other words, that India is exporting same set of goods to the US. There is no diversification. You can see this in terms of intensive margin and extensive margin. Intensive margin is exporting same good to the same destination. Same good to same destination. So we are not diversifying it. The the extensive margin has two components: geographic extensive margin, product extensive margin. Geography is we are diversifying into different markets. Product is we are diversifying the commodities into different commodities, not same one. But look at this. This is for government statistics. Our intensive margin is much higher for the US, which means they are exporting same set of goods like marine products to the US. Our product margin is very extensive margin is close to 1. Higher the value, which means lower the product diversification. So therefore, if 50% tariff comes into effect, all our marine things will be serious trouble. Like frozen shrimps and fish, all going to be serious unless we find their new markets. The short term is going to be not that easy. Now another important challenge that we have is, I'm sorry, I'm taking more time. Challenge is the climate change. And this statistics I got from economics, which is quite interesting. First time the government has come up with this number. Look at in 3 years, in 2 years time, the area damaged by the weather disasters has actually multiplied. It's really going to be a serious problem, which means the frequency of the extreme events, occurrence of frequency of extreme events has increased. Earlier it used to be once in 5 years, 10 years, reduced to 5 years. Now every alternative years, either you see a flood or drought. And so the frequency of occurrence of these extreme events has increased, and hence the sharp increase in area damaged by the weather disaster, could be a drought or flood, right? So there are challenges that I thought I should just, as I told you, it's not very systematic, but throw some light for the thinking students, right? What are the way forward? Again, it's not very exhaustive. And there is a need to enhance public investment, particularly basic agricultural research and development, for the reason that the innovations by the firms for the profit is not socially optimum. You might have read about drone technology, say sensor technology, developed by private firms. Technology is costly. Farmers will not be able to adopt it. It is the public sector as a whole. I give a typical example. Hybrid cotton, like Dharabai region is known for cotton, right? It is not that public sector. I think there is an institute in Nagpur itself. They have promoted hybrid cotton, for no reason. That public sector hybrid cotton was not popularized, but all private players came, created havoc in production structure, right? Therefore, it is a need that public sector invest in critical technologies and then commercialize later. And then, important point is the productivity growth can lead to increase in the farmer's income. You cannot just double it, you cannot triple it. It's only now the government is coming to this, understand this real fact. 100 districts are identified for increasing the productivity growth. So only rising productivity growth can be a sustainable source of growth in income, not the other way around. Right? Profitable value chain. Why? Because the consumption pattern is changing. Like all these tomatoes, all these app-based things, you never know what food, where it is cooked, and then you consume it, you have problems, right? All sort of problems. And therefore, profitable value chain to supply nutritious food, healthy food. So, right, it's a health. Now, incidence of non-communicable disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer. It's a serious, there is a study. There is an early onset of diabetes among the adults. My students, I was surprised, saying that I have diabetes problem. 20 years old, 21 years old, students say diabetic problem. Why? Because it's driven by the type of food that you consume, right? The incentive structure, particularly for marginal small farmers, is a need. Natural resources, is enough literature to show that community participation, the community, right, can help to conserve the resource, the groundwater, land, fertility, maintenance, that only can do that. Integrate these poor and resource poor, again, disadvantaged farmers with the market, and there's a need to diversify the export market and find a new destination markets for agricultural products. So with this, I thank you for your attention. I know it was a lunch, but thank you very much. I see students sitting quietly, looking at, staring at me. Who is this person? Why is right? Anyway, thank you so much.
Interested to ask questions. The floor is open for questions now.
What are the measures we can take to overcome from unequal distribution of land to the lower background classes?
Very good question. One I can make for the fun. Because our land reform is failed. Right? Our land reforms still remains an unfinished agenda. Right? So we had like 4 different ways of doing it. Abolition of intermediary zamindari system, tenancy reforms, and then land ceiling consolidations. So the Land Ceiling Act had loopholes. Consolidation never took a shape. That's why you have parcels of land scattered all over. Small, that's why technology, drone is not flying because land size is too small, right? And so rather than dropping fertilizer in your field, it may drop in my field. So land reforms, is there a scope for it? Or is there a surplus land to redistribute to these socially disadvantaged groups? It is not going to work. It's not going to be right. But rather, liberalize the land leasing market. So liberalize the land leasing market, put the checks and balances to see that the tenants are not exploited. Tenants are registered, right? And there is a there's equity, there's a fairness, equity, the sharing of, the benefits between the tenants and the landowners. So in my view, only way to do is to liberalize the land leasing market, make legislative measures more effective, and see that there is an equity in the market. Do you understand what I said? Oh, great. That's the way out. Right. It's difficult to redistribute because we don't have that much. There's already competition for the land. Very good question. I appreciate it.
Good afternoon, sir. How can government ensure fair price for farmers while keeping food affordable for consumers?
Yeah. Again, very interesting question. The government always to make sure that the farmers get a fair price, a reasonable price for their commodities, right? Now these measures like minimum support price is one such a measure that informs the farmer. The system of announcing minimum support price is to inform the farmer, make the farmer aware that look, this is the minimum price below which the farmer will not sell the product, right? Now even if a farmer is aware of this, but compelled to sell at a price which a trader is ready to buy or dictating to buy that. Why is it so? Is it because there is an imperfection in the not only product market and also the factor market? Now what is these imperfections? Now some farmers are aware of MSP. The NSS survey says that almost 80%, still larger, number, but still larger number, do not know what even MSP is. Do not know what is minimum support price. There is the information asymmetry, and hence they are subject to the exploitations. Right? That's one part. So the second part, even if they are aware, the farmer is forced to sell at a lower price because of this imperfection factor market. What is that? That is something called interlocking of product market, credit market. That since there are many studies, there's also a study on how the socially disadvantaged farmers are discriminated by the institutional banking system, institutional credit market. How they make the person to go around it. How the small and marginal farmers are not provided loans. Even if they get loan, the transaction cost for them is very high. Number of times they should visit the bank, paperwork, discourages them. Unless the credit market, particularly, problems in the credit market is addressed, it's really difficult to make that product market function well. Right? Now, even the NSS data shows that almost 70% of the credit that year, I'm correct, 70% of the credit requirement comes from the non-institutional source, money lenders, traders, friends, and relatives are the major sources of providers of loan to the farmers. Now, a farmer takes a loan from the trader, and he is compelled to sell that commodity to the trader or money lender. So this problem still exists. So unless, it's a very good question, unless imperfections in the factor market, particularly credit market, is addressed, it's really difficult to make the farmers, realize the problem and then demand or command for the remunerative prices. To address this issue, only FPOs, Farmer Producer Organization, came into picture. Farmers collectively come together, share the produce, sell collectively, get a higher price. But it's still a long way to go.
Thank you very much, sir. We highly appreciate your efforts. We shall now pause for lunch. You all are requested to please move forward to the third floor. I request all the students to kindly follow the instructions.